Chapter 1073. Inside the blood demon world, Nye Tian felt the blood demon power surging in the surrounding space, and his expression became slightly complicated. He had seen the blood demon power of the blood-slaughtered spirit before. It was extremely bloody and bone-chilling, but compared to Lin Yi's blood demon power, the blood-slaughtered spirit was not worth mentioning at all. Lin Yi's blood demon power, in addition to being cold and bloody, also contained a very strange power. Nye Tian's holographic divine runes could perceive that the blood demon power contained a terrible dark energy. This dark energy was actually a bit similar to the divine power. What was even more terrifying was that the blood demon power's invasive nature was very strong. It constantly seeped into Nye Tian's body, weakening his martial body Yuan Meridian. Even if Nye Tian activated the ultimate Fire Scarlet Heaven battle armor, he still could not stop the blood demon power from invading. The power of the blood demon boundary was very terrifying. Fortunately, Nye Tian had the Star Origin Stone in his body, so the power of the stars was not suppressed by any power. Even the boundary couldn't suppress the power of the stars. This was the terror of the Force Origin. However, the blood demon power was constantly invading his body and weakening his strength, which was not a good thing. I must break the blood demon world as soon as possible. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought to himself. He raised his head and looked at Lin Yi. The latter's complexion had improved a lot. He had actually recovered his strength. Nye Tian, it seems that I still underestimated you. High up in the sky, Lin Yi roared wildly. His voice had become hoarse, and his face was even more ferocious and terrifying. He didn't expect Nye Tian's strength to be so strange. There seemed to be a terrible power in the latter's body that was not suppressed by the blood demon world at all. At this time, Lin Yi's eyes became more and more red, as if bright red blood was boiling under high temperature, appearing extremely strange. The smell of blood was strong and pungent, filling the blood demon world. What a strange pair of eyes! Looking into Lin Yi's blood-red eyes, Nye Tian felt a strong sense of suffocation, which made his eyes flicker. Nye Tian, even if your strength has exceeded my expectations, you are still destined to die in today's battle. Lin Yi's eyes flashed with a terrifying aura. His killing intent was sharp to the extreme, and he seemed very confident, as if he was sure that he could kill Nye Tian. Really? With a cold smile, the corner of Nye Tian's mouth rose as he said, "You're overconfident, Lin Yi." Nye Tian could see that Lin Yi seemed to have a more terrifying trump card that he had yet to reveal. However, he was not afraid because his trump card was more terrifying. Dawn of the Morning Star, if it could even break through the ancient restrictions, what could a mere blood demon realm amount to? As long as the blood demon realm was broken, Nye Tian had absolute confidence that he could defeat Lin Yi in one move. Nye Tian, to be able to force me to this point, you are indeed a troublesome fellow. It's a pity that you chose the wrong opponent. Because what I want to do must succeed, and the person I want to kill must die. Lin Yi's face was solemn, and his whole body was surging with killing intent. His eyes were sharp to the extreme. At this moment, his eyes suddenly flickered. After that, a huge amount of blood-red qi was released. The smell of blood pervaded the air. In an instant, the entire barrier was filled with a terrifying power. It was as if some kind of power that was hidden in the barrier had been activated. Nye Tian felt a huge pressure coming from all over his body, as if the space was about to be frozen. He immediately understood that the dark evil energy lurking in the blood demon realm had been activated. Immediately, the power of countless black runes surged in the barrier, filling it in an instant. The whole barrier suddenly fell into a blood-red darkness, and the smell of blood was so strong that it almost turned into liquid. What a terrifying aura! Something terrible seems to have appeared in the barrier. The eyes of the crowd trembled violently, and an inexplicable fear surged in their hearts. They subconsciously retreated. Even outside the barrier, that terrifying qi was still suffocating. It was hard to imagine how Nye Tian, who was inside the barrier, could withstand that kind of oppressive qi. Nye Tian. At that moment Cher, who was in the distance, was shaking. She couldn't help but grab Emo Rushi's hand and said in a low voice, "Sister Rushi, will Nye Tian be alright? Don't worry, Nye Tian won't lose." Emo Rushi nodded solemnly and gave Shui-er a firm answer. However, there was a hint of panic in her eyes that was difficult to conceal. Emo Rushi was very confident in Nye Tian, but Lin Yi's strength was really too strange, so she couldn't help but feel nervous. Lin Feng and Niz Chen were even more nervous, and their eyes were constantly flashing with panic. Lin Feng felt ashamed. A few months ago, he was evenly matched with Nye Tian, but now, he could only be a bystander and watch Nye Tian fight. Gradually, the black symbols in the barrier became denser and denser, and the entire barrier became dark, as if the entire space had fallen into darkness. "How do you feel now, Nye Tian?" Lin Yi's cold, disdainful voice echoed out in the blood-red sky. "How do you feel now?" In his eyes, Nye Tian was already a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, waiting to be slaughtered. "You think you've already won, right?" Nye Tian indifferently smiled, but his eyes were full of indifference. He immediately said, "If I'm not mistaken, what you're releasing is a kind of spirit strength, right?" Nye Tian was no stranger to spirit strength. He even had 3 kinds of spirit strength in his body. He could sense that the black runes in the barrier around him were a type of spirit force. Lin Yi was surprised, but then he laughed like crazy and said, "I wouldn't have thought you'd know so many things. I can tell you that the strength I released is the darkness godly marks. It's the spirit strength of the blood evil eyes. It's a strength that surpasses the qi of the earth and heaven. It's terrifying, you can't imagine it. If I want to, I can kill you anytime I want." The ice-cold voice resounded in the barrier. It was low and hoarse, and it was filled with extreme arrogance. Spirit strength was a strength that even cultivators at the peak of the Celestial Emperor realm couldn't understand. Lin Yi didn't think that Nye Tian could resist it. "Darkness godly marks," said Nye Tian in a cold way. He smiled coldly and said, "I wonder if your godly marks are stronger than star strength?" Almost at the same time, Nye Tian stretched out his palm, and a dazzling white light ball appeared. Although it was only the size of a human head, it released a terrifying aura, as if it could tear and destroy everything. The white ball of light was none other than the star power that Nye Tian had condensed and condensed. Chi chi chi. At the moment when the star light ball appeared, a dazzling light was released, like a sharp blade. It tore the darkness godly marks in the space, emitting an ear-piercing sound, and illuminating the space within a few hundred meters. Chapter 1074. In the Blood Demon world, Lin Yi stood high up in the sky, looking at the white ball of light in Nye Tian's hand with a shocked expression. He didn't expect that Nye Tian still had such a terrifying trump card. The white ball of light didn't seem to be afraid of the Darkness Destroyer divine rune and could even tear it apart. What kind of power is this? Suddenly, Lin Yi's eyes trembled and his voice became a little sharp. The Darkness Destroyer divine rune was a power that surpassed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. How could it be torn apart by another power? This made Lin Yi puzzled. He originally thought that as long as he released the Darkness Destroyer divine rune, Nye Tian would no longer have the strength to fight back, but he didn't expect the latter to be hiding such terrifying strength. "Lin Yi, you won't have the chance to find out." Nye Tian, however, didn't waste any time with words. Instead, he jerked his head up and sneered. Then, he stomped his feet in midair and thrust his palm out. Like a blinding bolt of white lightning, the ball of starlight shot up into the sky. Hua! In an instant, the starlight ball's speed reached the extreme. Like a sharp white blade, it cut through the blood-red darkness and tore apart the Darkness Destroyer divine rune inside the barrier. Chi chi chi. Then, an ear-piercing sound came from the space. The space that was about to solidify was instantly torn apart and the endless blood-red darkness slowly dimmed. Impossible! Lin Yi looked at the white ball of light rushing towards him. His eyes trembled violently and he roared hoarsely. Outside the barrier, the crowd didn't know what was happening. They only saw a ball of light appear in the endless darkness and move extremely fast towards the sky, drawing a beam of light that was about to tear the entire barrier apart. What kind of power is that? How can it be so powerful? The crowd's hearts trembled and their eyes became dull. Morning star daybreak. In the distance, Mo Rushi saw the white light and her beautiful eyes flickered with great surprise. She had seen Nye Tian use the morning star daybreak to break the ancient restriction in Destiny Nether Forest. Seeing Nye Tian use this move again, Mo Rushi felt inexplicably shocked and excited. She already felt that the darkness was about to end and light was about to come. Blood Demon Realm, break! At this moment, Nye Tian looked at the ball of stars that had already soared into the sky. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly as he softly murmured, "Boom!" In the next moment, the ball of starlight trembled slightly before exploding with a loud bang. Immediately, boundless light erupted in an instant and shot out in all directions. The rays of light were dazzling and extremely powerful. When they collided with the Blood Moon Profound World, cracks appeared on it. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the might of the morning star daybreak was completely unleashed, and the entire barrier could no longer withstand the huge impact. After a mighty muffled sound, it directly collapsed. Suddenly, the dark void was completely torn apart. A dazzling light spread out, and the dark space suddenly became bright. When the crowd saw this, the depression in their hearts dissipated and was replaced by the joy of dawn. Everyone was dumbfounded. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. It was hard to imagine that Nye Tian could actually burst out such a terrifying power under the suppression of such a tyrannical barrier. What exactly was hidden in Nye Tian's body? The crowd's heart trembled. The way they looked at the silver-haired figure in the void slowly changed to shock, horror, and even fear. Tian Chi-Chi was already speechless. Every time she thought that Nye Tian would definitely die, the latter would always be able to escape danger and even injure his opponent. It was really terrifying. Xiao Lingyuan and Tian Liang were also shocked to the extreme. Their eyes were dull and their expressions were stiff. If they were trapped in the Blood Demon Realm, they definitely wouldn't be able to withstand a single move from Lin Yi. However, Nye Tian forcefully resisted Lin Yi's attack, injured him, and finally broke the Blood Demon Realm directly. All of this was too strange. Nye Tian's strength was unimaginable. Lin Yi was also not simple. If he was facing opponents like Xiao Lingyuan and Tian Liang, he would have already won. Unfortunately, his opponent was Nye Tian. High up in the sky, Lin Yi's figure stood there, but he could not help but tremble. His whole body was dripping with blood, and his flesh was badly mutilated. It was almost impossible to tell that he was human. What was even more terrifying was that his eyes had exploded. The blood demon pupils were destroyed, and his eye sockets were filled with deep darkness. The moment the blood demon realm was broken, he forcibly used the blood demon pupils to save his life at the cost of his eyes. Lin Yi, you've lost. Nye Tian's figure soared into the sky and stood opposite Lin Yi. He spoke in a cold voice, his eyes filled with sharp killing intent. It had to be said that Lin Yi was the strongest opponent Nye Tian had encountered since his rebirth. Even the Heaven Realm assassins and ancestor Thundercloud couldn't be compared to Lin Yi. More importantly, Lin Yi was a cultivator of the same age as Nye Tian. His martial Dao talent was terrifying and unimaginable. If it weren't for Nye Tian having too many trump cards, the one who lost at this time would definitely be him. I've lost? Lin Yi's figure swayed slightly, as if he had just woken up from a dream. His whole body looked sluggish, as if he had lost all his thoughts. He had never thought that he would actually lose to Nye Tian, and lose so miserably at that. One of his arms was gone, His whole body was covered in scars, and the most terrifying thing was that his blood demon pupils were destroyed. The blood demon pupils was his biggest trump card. The reason why he was able to merge the bloodline power of the Black and Moon families was because of the blood demon pupils. With the blood demon pupils destroyed, his combat power had dropped by more than half. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I don't believe it. Suddenly Lin Yi screamed. His whole body seemed to have gone mad as he roared madly. I am born with the hidden dragon royal bloodline, I have awakened the ancient eyes, and I have merged the power of two bloodlines. How can I lose to you? This is impossible. I must be dreaming, I don't believe it. Lin Yi was an extremely talented cultivator. He had absolute confidence in his combat power and looked down on all the geniuses in the world. The Summer world and the three kings were all *T in his eyes. They were not worth mentioning. He had always looked down on these so-called geniuses and regarded them as clowns. It was precisely because of his strong self-confidence that when he was defeated, especially by a martialist of the same age as him, this self-confidence would suddenly collapse. His conviction would also be destroyed in an instant. The hidden dragon royal bloodline was a natural-born supreme emperor. How could he allow himself to be defeated? Being defeated by Nie Tian was a huge blow to Lin Yi. How could he not go crazy? Lin Yi, this is the end. Nie Tianling looked at Lin Yi coldly. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only the coldest killing intent. To be merciful to the enemy was to be merciless to oneself. How could Nie Tian not understand this truth? Lin Yi's talent was too strong, and his ambition was too big. Keeping him alive would definitely be a big disaster. You want to kill me? Lin Yi suddenly felt a cold, killing intent shrouding him. He was stunned, and a look of horror appeared on his face. At this moment, he was afraid. Chapter 1075. Nie Tian, you can't kill me. I'm the Destiny Cultivator, I haven't finished my mission. If you kill me, it will be a disaster for the Dragon Rebel clan, said Lin Yi in a trembling voice. He looked terrified. Nie Tian looked cold and said, You're the Destiny Cultivator. If you're alive, it will be a disaster for the Dragon Rebel clan. Nie Tian didn't believe in prophecies, but he knew that as long as Lin Yi was alive, he would become stronger. And I Jianming would be a great threat to him. Therefore, Lin Yi had to die. With a cold voice, Nie Tian took a step forward and unleashed his killing intent, filling the entire space with it. Even though he was going to win, Nie Tian didn't dare be careless. People like Lin Yi were like a centipede that died but didn't fall down. Even if his blood-red pupils were destroyed, who knew if he still had more terrifying cards up his sleeves? Nie Tian! Shouted someone at that moment. A silhouette appeared between Nie Tian and Lin Yi. It was Lin Feng. You want to save him? Asked Nie Tian in an ice-cold tone when he saw Lin Feng. Lin Feng was his friend, but if Lin Feng wanted to save Lin Yi, Nie Tian wouldn't agree. Nie Tian, I'm willing to die for him, said Lin Feng suddenly kneeling down. He looked determined. He knew that Lin Yi had made many mistakes and killed many people. He deserved to die. But Lin Yi was Lin Feng's brother after all. They were connected by blood and nothing could stop them. Last time, Lin Yi could have killed Lin Feng, but he had been merciful. Lin Feng believed that Lin Yi wasn't completely heartless, he still cared about his brother. Lin Feng. Nie Tian hadn't thought that Lin Feng would stop him from killing Lin Yi. He was surprised and said, You don't understand who you're trying to save. Nie Tian, I don't know why Lin Yi is like this, but I know that he's my brother. I have to save him, said Lin Feng. He looked sad and determined. After hearing what Lin Yi had said in the Devamara Palace, Lin Feng went to find Lu Lingyun and asked him some questions. He and Lin Yi were indeed the two orphans of the Mingjian villa. They were brothers connected by blood. He couldn't watch Lin Yi be killed. Lin Feng, you. Nie Tian's face darkened as he tried to figure out what to do. Nie Tian, this time, I'm begging you, You can cripple his pure spirit, but please don't kill him. I can't watch him, said Lin Feng emotionally. But before he finished talking, he sensed a terrifying strength descend from the sky. It was as if a gigantic invisible hand had grabbed his neck. He couldn't talk anymore. Lin Feng, Nie Tian was caught unprepared by the sudden turn of events, and couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He had been thinking about how to make Lin Feng give up. He hadn't thought that Lin Yi would suddenly attack Lin Feng. Lin Feng! Shouted an Zichen and the others when they saw Lin Feng being controlled by Lin Yi. Nie Tian, let me go. I promise I won't kill him, said Lin Yi coldly. His entire body was filled with the strength of a monstrous blood beast which surrounded Lin Feng. If Lin Yi moved, Lin Feng would be swallowed. You animal! He's your little brother! Shouted Nie Tian furiously. Lin Yi was insane. He wanted to kill his own little brother. A moment before, Lin Feng had used his own life to beg for mercy for him and had even offered to die for him. That guy had the heart of a wolf and the lungs of a dog. He would do anything to save his own life. So what if he's my little brother? Said Lin Yi coldly while moving backwards. I spared his life once and now he's using his life to save mine. We're even. What's wrong with that? Said Nie Tian in a gloomy way. He was slowly moving forwards. He was ready to use his absolute terror at any moment. His absolute terror could directly attack a cultivator's soul. If Lin Yi was distracted for a short moment, he would be able to kill him and save Lin Feng. Nie Tian, you won't be able to do that. However, at that moment, Mr. Jian's voice spread in the air. He then added, he has the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast. He can resist spiritual attacks. The pupils of a blood-ferocious beast? Nie Tian was stunned. He then said, isn't the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast destroyed? The pupils of a blood-ferocious beast are ancient. How could they be destroyed so easily? Replied Mr. Jian in a deep voice. Nie Tian was stupefied. He hadn't thought that the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast would be so terrifying. Could it be restored after the pupils were destroyed? Let him go. You won't be able to kill him, said Mr. Jian suddenly. Won't be able to kill him? Nie Tian was stupefied again. He didn't understand what Mr. Jian meant. If Lin Feng hadn't stopped him, he would have already killed Lin Yi. Mr. Jian said that Lin Yi couldn't be killed. This made Nie Tian very confused. His social status is extraordinary. I can't explain it to you right now. But you can't kill him now, said Mr. Jian hesitantly. Nie Tian frowned. Even though Mr. Jian didn't say anything, he still chose to believe in Mr. Jian. Nie Tian, I don't want both sides to be injured. Let me go and I will give an Jian Ming to you. What do you think? Said Lin Yi suddenly. Surprisingly, he wanted to negotiate with Nie Tian. At that moment, he was seriously injured. Even if he held Lin Feng hostage, it would be difficult for him to escape. Everybody looked at Nie Tian and waited for his reply. All right, said Nie Tian without thinking too much. He slightly nodded. Mo Rushi and the others were stupefied. They didn't know what was going on with Nie Tian. A moment before, Nie Tian's killing chi was extremely strong, but now he had suddenly calmed down. It was a bit strange. The others didn't say anything. They all believed in Nie Tian. Nie Tian, I believe that you are a man of your word, said Lin Yi when he sensed that Nie Tian's killing chi had disappeared. He frowned and immediately said, Xie Qiong, let him go. Everybody was stupefied. They didn't know who Lin Yi was talking to. Yes, master, said a mournful voice in the air. Then, an even more strange scene appeared. A black light appeared behind Lin Yi. It slowly expanded and condensed into a huge vortex. A very evil energy was released. Suddenly, the surrounding space was filled with a dark and bloody chi. Nie Tian looked at the black vortex and sensed an extremely evil energy. At the same time, there was also the chi of a deployment spell mixed in it. He guessed that it must be some kind of teleportation spell. Ni Jianming was hidden somewhere by Lin Yi and was directly teleported here. If Lin Yi didn't release Ni Jianming, it would be very difficult for Nie Tian and the others to find him. Chapter 1076. A figure appeared in the black vortex. It was Ni Jianming. Jianming. Ni Zichun saw Ni Jianming and stepped forward to hug him. Sister. Ni Jianming was very weak. He looked at Ni Zichun and shouted with difficulty. Then, he fainted. Nie Tian sensed Ni Jianming's qi. After confirming that the latter was fine and that there was no other power in his body, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Lin Yi hadn't attacked Ni Jianming yet. Nie Tian, I've released him. I'm leaving now. At that moment, Lin Yi said in a deep voice. His pitch-black pupils seemed to be flickering. Nie Tian was shocked. He clearly saw two small blood balls appear in Lin Yi's eye socket. They looked like new eyeballs. Lin Yi said while retreating, taking Lin Feng with him. Mo Rushi and the others wanted to chase after them, but they were stopped by Nie Tian. The latter said in a deep voice, "Let him go." This. Mo Rushi didn't understand why Nie Tian would be so soft-hearted at this moment. She still remembered that when she and Nie Tian were in Mo Yang City, he taught her to be cruel. Why did he become so soft-hearted now? Nie Tian just glanced at Mo Rushi and didn't explain much. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Yi took Lin Feng and left. Their silhouettes quickly disappeared. Nie Tian, that blood beast is gone. At that moment, Cher suddenly said. Blood beast. Nie Tian was stunned. It was very strange. Why did Cher know about blood beast? Why did she say that Lin Yi was a blood beast? Cher, what are you talking about? Who is the blood beast? Mo Rushi frowned. Her beautiful eyes flashed and she suddenly asked. He's the one who took Lin Feng away, he's Shui Yao, said Shuer while looking at Mo Rushi in a serious way. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes. He had a feeling that Lin Yi's identity was not that simple. Let's leave first. Nie Tian did not waste any time. He wanted to find a place to check on Ni Jianming's condition. Lin Feng had been taken away by Lin Yi, but after all, they were brothers. Lin Yi hadn't killed him. Mr. Nie Tian. Just when Nie Tian's group was about to leave, a sweet voice rang out. After that, Tian Chichi's figure appeared. Behind her stood a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man was none other than her father, the owner of the 9 Cold Auction House, Tian Liang. We need a quiet place. Nie Tian looked at Tian Chichi and did not beat around the bush. How could Nie Tian not understand Tian Chichi's intention when she came over at this time? She was obviously trying to rope him in. The strength that Nie Tian displayed just now was too strong, far exceeding Tian Liang and Tian Chichi's expectations. If they could become friends with such an expert, it would be a great opportunity for the Tian family and the 9 Cold Auction House. Even Tian Chichi was calculating in her heart whether she could use Nie Tian's strength to make the Tian family a clan that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Shao family. Nie Tian knew what the father and daughter of the Tian family were thinking. Of course, he would not be polite to them. Besides, the more impolite he was, the happier the father and daughter of the Tian family would be. Of course. Mr. Nie Tian, please come with me. Tian Chichi was extremely happy. She smiled sweetly and left with Nie Tian and the others. On the other side, when the head of the Shao family, Shao Lingyuan, saw Nie Tian and the others leave with the people of the Tian family, his eyes were filled with intense anger. He suppressed the annoyance in his heart and his chest was heaving up and down. The people of the Tian family dared to rope in strong cultivators in front of him. This was simply a naked challenge to the authority of the Shao family. After a short while, Nie Tian and the others appeared in the Tian family's residence. Tian Chichi had arranged a very good residence for them. Nie Tian, is jamming okay? In the room, Ni Zichun saw that Nie Tian had already checked Ni Jianming's body. He immediately stepped forward and asked nervously. He's fine, but he's too weak. Nie Tian nodded slightly, then took out a few elixirs and said, when he wakes up, give him these elixirs. He'll be fine in a few days. Thank you. And Iz Chun took the elixirs and thanked him deeply. Nie Tian nodded and did not stay any longer. He immediately returned to his room. Sword Elder, who is Lin Yi? Back in the room, Nie Tian was already impatient and asked anxiously. Previously, he had the opportunity to kill Lin Yi, but he was stopped by the Sword Elder. However, the latter did not explain too much, which made him very puzzled. Lin Yi. The Sword Elder said the name in a deep voice. His expression was dignified and even a little nervous. After hesitating for a long time, he said, he is the same as Ni Jianming. The same as Ni Jianming? Nie Tian was stunned at first, then he thought of something. His face changed and he cried out involuntarily, he is also a reincarnated person. The biggest secret of Ni Jianming was that he was the reincarnation of the ancient mystic dragon demon saint. The Sword Elder said that Lin Yi was the same as Ni Jianming. It was obvious that Lin Yi was also a reincarnated person. How could Nie Tian not be surprised by another reincarnated powerhouse? After being stunned for a few seconds, Nie Tian's expression eased a little. He suppressed the shock in his heart and said, Sword Elder, who was he in his previous life? Lin Yi was a reincarnated person. The Sword Elder did not let Nie Tian kill him because his previous life was extraordinary. Blood Demon King. The Sword Elder was silent for a long time and finally said 3 words, word by word. When he said these 3 words, the Sword Elder's expression was full of shock. Blood Demon King. Nie Tian frowned. Although he did not know what the name represented, from the Sword Elder's reaction, it must be a very horrible person. Blood Demon King, the leader of the ancient Blood Demon clan, was one of the 12 top powerhouses of the ancient demon clan. The Sword Elder calmed down a little and started to explain, when the Blood Demon clan was at its peak, it was almost the leader of the 12 demon clans. But later, the Blood Demon clan was destroyed by a bigger force. Only a few of the Blood Demon clan survived. The Blood Demon King is nowhere to be found. Hearing the Sword Elder's words, Nie Tian was stunned. Then he thought of something and said, the force that destroyed the Blood Demon clan was the Dragon Rebel clan. That's right. The Sword Elder let out a long sigh and nodded heavily. He said, it is said that the heavenly secret prophecy of the Dragon Rebel clan was born when the Blood Demon clan was destroyed. Nie Tian was stunned. He recalled the past information in his mind. He once heard from the Dragon Rebel clan's Grand Elder that the Dragon Rebel clan did not only destroy the Divine Dragon clan but also almost all the other clans. It seemed that the Blood Demon clan was one of the clans that were destroyed. The Blood Demon clan was destroyed. The heavenly secret prophecy appeared in the Dragon Rebel clan. Hundreds of thousands of years later, the leader of the Blood Demon clan was reincarnated and became the destined one in the heavenly secret prophecy. He had to admit that the cause and effect cycle was quite ironic. The members of the Dragon Rebel clan would never have thought that the destined one who would destroy the Dragon Rebel clan would be the leader of the Blood Demon clan that they had destroyed. Chapter 1077. In the room, Nie Tian suddenly wondered if Lin Yi knew that he was the reincarnation of the Blood Demon King. Generally speaking, reincarnated people would not remember their previous identities. Only when their strength kept increasing would their memories of their previous lives slowly awaken. For example, Ni Jianming still did not know that he was the reincarnation of the Black Dragon Demon Saint. Hearing Nie Tian's question, the Sword Elder could not help but frown. After a long time, he shook his head and said, he doesn't know his identity yet. He just thinks that he is born with the Blood Demon pupils, so he can control the Blood Demons and make them bow down to him. Nie Tian nodded. Lin Yi did not know his real identity, so the situation was not too bad. Sword Elder, why didn't you let me kill Lin Yi just now? At this time, Nye Tian asked again. Since Lin Yi was the reincarnation of the Blood Demon King, and was once one of the 12 peak experts of the ancient demon clan, there was an extremely terrifying power in his body. If this power was awakened, Lin Yi's strength would be unimaginably terrifying. Just now, it was almost the best time to kill Lin Yi, but the Sword Elder did not let Nye Tian do it. It was very strange. Nye Tian, I once told you that the Blood Demon clan is born without a physical body and needs to rely on other people's bodies to survive. The Sword Elder frowned and explained in a deep voice, I don't know why. After the Blood Demon King was reincarnated, he directly had a physical body, and it merged perfectly with Lin Yi's body. If you kill Lin Yi, you will only destroy the Blood Demon King's physical body. You won't be able to kill the Blood Demon King at all. Instead, you will release the terrifying power of the Blood Demon in Lin Yi's body. If that's the case, it will be a disaster for the entire Nine Cold region and even the entire Heaven realm. I see. Nye Tian's eyes suddenly trembled. He still had a lingering fear and sweat oozed out of his forehead. Fortunately, the Sword Elder stopped him in time. Otherwise, if he destroyed Lin Yi's physical body and released the power of the Blood Demon King, it would be really terrible. The Blood Demon King was an ancient expert. The terrifying power in his body was unimaginable. After a while, Nye Tian frowned and said, Does that mean I'll never be able to kill Lin Yi unless I can reach the God realm? Not necessarily. The Sword Elder faintly said, the corner of his mouth raised into a smile. He said, The Blood Demon has a natural nemesis. If you want to reach the strength of the Blood Demon King, I don't know how long it will take. If you really want to kill Lin Yi, you have to wait for him to grow up. Who? Nye Tian was taken aback. He did not know who had the ability to kill the Blood Demon King. That person is right beside you. The Sword Elder did not say it directly, but sighed. By my side? Nye Tian was stunned again. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, You mean Cher? Cher. That's right, Nye Tian's first reaction was Cher. Just now, Cher directly said that Lin Yi was a blood demon, as if she already knew Lin Yi's true identity. Yes. Seeing that Nye Tian had already guessed it, the Sword Elder said, If you want to kill Lin Yi, Cher will be the key. You have to let her grow up. Nye Tian frowned. The Sword Elder always told him half of the story and not the whole story. He really wanted to know what was Cher's identity. However, the Sword Elder had always been secretive about Cher's identity. He did not even dare to mention it. The Sword Elder dared to mention people like the Xian Long Demon Saint and the Blood Demon King, but he did not dare to say the identity of Cher. This was puzzling. Could it be that Cher's identity was more terrifying than the Xian Long Demon Saint and the Blood Demon King? Nye Tian could not understand it at the moment, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Since the Sword Elder did not say it, he could not force the latter to say it. Sword Elder, you said that if Cher grows up, how does she grow up? After thinking for a moment, Nye Tian asked with a puzzled look. He had already sensed that Cher's body was completely different from an ordinary martial artist's body. Cher's body did not seem to have any yuan meridians. She did not even have any meridians. It was a very strange body. This was similar to the legendary innate broken meridians body, but it was even more strange and difficult to deal with. Cher is different from ordinary people. Her body does not have yuan meridians. The Sword Elder sighed. His expression became solemn as he said, So, you need to create yuan meridians for her. Create yuan meridians? Nye Tian's throat moved and he was stunned. If the Sword Elder did not have a serious expression, he would definitely think that the former was joking. Nye Tian had only heard of awakening yuan meridians, but he had never heard of creating yuan meridians. This was simply impossible. Yuan meridians were innate. How could it be created after birth? Nye Tian, I am not joking with you. If you want Cher to become a martial artist, you must create yuan meridians for her. The Sword Elder said seriously. Nie Tion's expression stiffened. He finally calmed down and said, Sword Elder, what do I need to do? Since the Sword Elder said to create Yuan meridians, he must know how to do it. Creating Yuan meridians, Nie Tion did not even dare to think about it. How could he know how to do it? First, you need to find something that can replace Yuan meridians. The Sword Elder's face was solemn as he said, after that, you need to find something that can replace Yuan meridians and fuse it with Cher's body. As long as you find these two things, creating Yuan meridians for Cher will be half done. Nie Tion's eyes shone, revealing a touch of passion as he said, Where can I find these two things? He had never heard of anything that could replace Yuan meridians. 3 lives grass. The Sword Elder's eyes trembled as he said these 3 words. 3 lives grass? When Nie Tion heard this name, he could not help but let out a strange cry. 3 lives grass was only a 3rd-rank medicinal herb. Its healing effects were not bad, but to say that this thing could replace Yuan meridians, even if you beat him to death, Nie Tion would not believe it. A mere 3rd-rank medicinal herb could actually replace Yuan meridians. Wasn't this a joke? However, in the next moment, Nie Tion's eyes suddenly became sluggish and his expression became stiff. He suddenly remembered what happened in Holy Light City half a month ago. When Cher saw a 3 lives grass, she insisted on buying it. Nie Tion still remembered Cher's expression. He had never seen Cher like that before. Could it be that 3 lives grass can really replace Yuan meridians? Nie Tion was stunned as he opened his mouth. His eyes were somewhat dull. The Sword Elder nodded his head and said, Of course, ordinary 3 lives grass cannot. To be able to replace Yuan meridians, it must be a 3 lives grass that has survived for more than 10,000 years. More than 10,000 years? Nie Tion was inexplicably stunned. Then, with an embarrassed expression, he laughed and said, Sword Elder, 3 lives grass can only survive for 30 years. After 30 years, it will automatically wither. How could there be a 3 lives grass that has survived for more than 10,000 years? 3 lives grass was a very common medicinal herb. As an alchemist, Nie Tion was very familiar with this kind of medicinal herb. A 3 lives grass that could survive for 50 years was very rare. It was impossible to have a 3 lives grass that had survived for more than 10,000 years. Nie Tion, 3 lives grass has another name. You should know what it is, right? The Sword Elder did not answer Nie Tion's question. Instead, he asked a question. Chapter 1078. Nie Tion suddenly remembered that the 3 lives grass had another name, 9 lives demon cat. His eyes couldn't help but become sluggish. His expression stiffened for a few seconds before returning to normal. 9 lives demon cat. This name was something that Nie Tion had seen in an ancient book that recorded medicinal ingredient. At that time, he was very curious as to why the 3 lives grass had such a name. Sword Elder, is there really a 10,000-year 3 lives grass? After calming down a bit, Nie Tion's eyes flashed as he asked. Of course there is. The Sword Elder faintly smiled. His expression had already calmed down, and he said, The reason why the 3 lives grass is called 9 lives demon cat is because of its strong vitality. Just like a demon cat with 9 lives, it is very difficult to die. Hearing the Sword Elder's words, Nie Tion frowned with a face full of doubt. He was not unfamiliar with the 3 lives grass. It was only a very ordinary 3rd-rank medicinal ingredient, and it was not as terrifying as the Sword Elder said. The Sword Elder saw that Nie Tion did not believe him, but he laughed and said, The 3 lives grass is a variant of the ancient Manjasaka. Its strong vitality can only be displayed in the cruelest of environments. The current 3 lives grass, because its living environment is too comfortable, has become weaker and weaker. Finally, it has become a common 3rd-rank medicinal ingredient. Nie Tion was surprised. He did not think that the 3 lives grass would have such an origin. It was actually a variant of the ancient Manjusaka. Perhaps in the ancient times, the 3 lives grass had a strong vitality and could live for 10,000 years. Unfortunately, its living environment changed, and its vitality withered from generation to generation. Finally, it became a third-rank medicinal ingredient. The evolution of the 3 lives grass's vitality was in accordance with the saying, "Born in hardship, died in ease." Sword Elder, according to what you said, only the 3 lives grass from the ancient times can live for more than 10,000 years. Where can I find such a 3 lives grass? After a moment, Nye Tian became cold and said with a face full of worry. That is your problem. Perhaps in some extreme environments, the 3 lives grass from the ancient times still exists. The Sword Elder faintly smiled. Then, his figure flashed and he went to rest. Nye Tian's face was filled with helplessness. It seemed that finding the 3 lives grass was not an easy task. He didn't have any clues, so he could only put this matter in his heart for now. In the future, if he went to a new environment, he could ask more. However, Nye Tian still didn't understand why the Sword Elder said that share was the key to killing Lin Yi. Could it be that share had some kind of power that specifically restrained the power of the blood demon? Unable to figure it out, Nye Tian stopped thinking about it. A short while later, he arrived at a small courtyard, where Emo Rushi and Shui were chatting about something, and they seemed to be very happy. When Emo Rushi and Share were together, the sage imprint in her body was suppressed. This was a pleasant surprise, and from the looks of it, Emo Rushi quite liked to stay with Share. Nye Tian. Seeing that Nye Tian had arrived, the 2 girls stood up at the same time and smiled in unison. Suddenly, their spring radiance was so radiant that all the flowers paled in comparison. Both girls were devastatingly beautiful, and when they stood together, they set off each other. This kind of beautiful scene was simply a dream. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment before he reacted. His face was slightly embarrassed as he smiled and said, "Are you all right?" "We are fine." Cher ran over and intimately hugged Nye Tian's arm. Her clear eyes looked at Emo Rushi and happily said, "Sister Rushi said she would teach me cultivation." Cultivation? Nye Tian suddenly froze, his face stiffened. "Nye Tian, are you all right?" Emo Rushi saw that Nye Tian's reaction was not right, so she explained, "Cher's strength is too weak. I want her to cultivate, but her Yuan meridian seems to be a bit special, I can't sense it." Nye Tian's face darkened. Of course, Emo Rushi couldn't sense it. Even Nye Tian couldn't sense it, because Cher didn't have Yuan meridian, not even normal meridians. "Nye Tian, can you help Cher check her Yuan meridian?" Emo Rushi didn't know much about Cher's condition. She came in front of Nye Tian and asked with a passionate gaze. Nye Tian was slightly stunned and didn't know what to say. Cher and Emo Rushi were very excited, especially Cher. She was so happy that she almost jumped up. Nye Tian really didn't have the heart to hurt her. However, Cher's condition was very special. She didn't have Yuan meridian in her body, and she had to create Yuan meridian in order to step on the path of martial arts. Nye Tian, Cher, she. Emo Rushi was a meticulous person. When she saw Nye Tian's expression, her eyes flickered and her face was filled with worry. Cher is fine, but I feel that her personality is too gentle. She's not suitable to walk the path of martial arts. She's more suitable to be an alchemist. Let her identify the herbs first. Nye Tian thought for a moment and said with a smile. Emo Rushi pursed her lips. She knew that Nye Tian must have something that he didn't say, but she didn't ask. She said to Cher, "Cher, you're not suitable for fighting and killing. It's better for you to be an alchemist." Cher held the phantom snow fox in her arms and nodded her head. She was still very happy and said, "Whatever Big Sister Rushi tells Cher to do, Cher will do." Emo Rushi smiled and nodded, but there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Right at this moment, Cher suddenly screamed and said nervously, "Momo is awake. I'm going to see him." After that, Cher ran towards the room with the phantom snow fox in her arms. Momo? Nye Tian looked at Cher and was surprised. Did Cher have a pet again? Emorushi saw the strange look on Nye Tian's face and couldn't help but laugh. She explained, Momo is the 3 lives grass. Cher just coaxed Momo to sleep, and now Momo is awake again. This. Nye Tian was speechless. The 3 lives grass was a medicinal herb, but Cher actually gave it a name. She even coaxed it to sleep and then said that it was awake. What was going on? Nye Tian was very knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, but he had never heard of a medicinal herb that could be used to sleep. However, from the looks of it, Snow seemed to be quite interested in the 3 lives grass. He had to admit that this 3 lives grass was really lucky. It had a master like Cher, and she even coaxed it to sleep. Even Nye Tian didn't have this kind of treatment. Emorushi also felt that Cher's mind seemed to be different from others. It seemed that she could really understand the language of spiritual beasts and spiritual herbs. She even saw with her own eyes that Cher made the 3 lives grass do strange movements. At that time, she thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. Nye Tian, is there something wrong with Cher's Yuan Meridian? Emorushi didn't tell Nye Tian about it, but stepped forward and asked. She could tell that Nye Tian must have something that he didn't say. Cher's Yuan Meridian is a little special, and she can't cultivate for now. But don't worry, I'll help her solve it. Nye Tian smiled faintly, and a strong confidence appeared on his face. Saying that, Nye Tian held Emorushi in his arms. Speaking of which, they hadn't been alone together for a long time. Nye Tian. Right at that moment, an extremely untimely voice sounded, and then a figure appeared in a hurry. It was Lin Feng. Chapter 1079. Nye Tian wasn't nervous when he saw Lin Feng. He let go of Emorushi and smiled indifferently, "You're back." Nye Tian wasn't surprised that Lin Feng had suddenly appeared. Lin Yi had taken Lin Feng away because they were brothers. No matter how cruel Lin Yi was, he wouldn't kill Lin Feng for no reason. Nye Tian, today, Lin Feng pulled a long face. He had come to apologize to Nye Tian. If he hadn't shown up, Lin Yi would have been killed by Nye Tian. Nye Tian, however, smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Fortunately, Lin Feng had stopped him. Otherwise, the situation would have been terrible. Nye Tian told me to tell you something. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. At that moment, Lin Feng's eyes twinkled and he said, he went to the godly area in the heaven world. He said he would wait for you there. Sure, Nye Tian said with a smile, his face expressionless. Nye Tian, he didn't die this time. He must hate you. If you really want to go to the godly area in the heaven world, you must be careful. Lin Feng said when he saw that Nye Tian didn't care at all. He won't give up easily. He will definitely get his revenge. Nye Tian nodded, his expression growing slightly serious. He knew that after Lin Yi saw how powerful the hidden dragon royal bloodline was, he would want it even more. Coincidentally, Nye Tian also wanted the hidden dragon royal bloodline. There would definitely be a battle to the death between the two. Nye Tian guessed that Lin Yi was in a hurry to go to the godly area in the heaven world because he wanted to increase his strength as soon as possible. He didn't want to lose to Nye Tian again. After Lin Feng left, Nye Tian and Emorushi talked for a while and then left. Because Cher was always there, it was inconvenient to do some things, so he could only endure. The next morning, Nye Tian walked out of his room, his entire person brimming with health and vigor. The injuries left behind in yesterday's battle were completely recovered. Nye Tian felt that his strength had increased somewhat. But wanting to advance to the second-level Heavenly Emperor seemed to be still too early. Lord Nye Tian, my master wants you to go to the auction house. At this moment, a person who looked like a servant appeared. His face was filled with panic, as if something big had happened. Nye Tian went blank for a moment before asking, "Did something happen?" "I don't know. It seems to be related to the Shao family." the servant said and urged Nie Tian to hurry over. Nie Tian nodded his head. With a stomp of his feet, his figure directly soared into the sky and turned into a stream of light in the sky. Since the matter was related to the Shao family, it must be urgent. Therefore, Nie Tian did not greet Emo Rushi and the others and directly went over. The nine-cold auction house wasn't far from the sweet manor. Nie Tian's figure flickered a few times and arrived above the auction house in the blink of an eye. It's indeed the Shao family. Nie Tian's gaze turned intent and saw a large number of black-clothed martial artists gathered in the plaza in front of the auction house. Each and every one of their auras was very strong. They were actually all around the 9th-level heaven-being realm. The Shao family is indeed very powerful. Nie Tian was slightly surprised in his heart. There were more than 100 9th-level heaven-being martial artists present. The strength of the Shao family's foundation made people have a whole new level of respect. So many 9th-level heaven-being martial artists were sufficient to deal with the entire Meru world. However, the 9 cold regions' martial artists all looked down on the Meru world's people, just like how the Meru world's people looked down on the 3,000 small world. The 9 cold regions' cultivation environment was far better than the Meru world. The people here rarely entered the Meru world. They also did not allow the Meru world's people to enter the 9 cold region. The Shao family's first elder died at Lin Yi's hands inexplicably. The Shao family would not find Lin Yi to take revenge. They could only find the 9 cold auction house to take revenge. However, Nie Tian did not expect the Shao family's people to be so arrogant. They directly brought so many martial artists and barged into the auction house. On the plaza, Tian Liang's face darkened. He looked at Shao Lingyuan cold and said, "Shao family head, you brought so many people to my auction house. What is the meaning of this?" Tian Liang. The corner of Shao Lingyuan's mouth twitched. A cold light flickered in his eyes. He called Tian Liang by her name and said coldly, "My Shao family's first elder died at the 9 cold auction house. Shao Feng, a direct descendant of the Shao family, also died at the auction house. Don't you owe me an explanation?" Explanation? Before Tian Liang could speak, Tian Qiqi, who was behind him, stepped forward angrily and said sternly, "Shao Feng died at the hands of the Shao family's first elder, and the Shao family's first elder died at the hands of Lin Yi. Your Shao family did not seek revenge from Lin Yi, but sought trouble with our auction house. What is the meaning of this? Are you taking advantage of your power to bully others?" Tian Qiqi's words attracted a lot of discussion from the surrounding crowd. Yeah, the Shao family has gone too far. Shao Feng and Shao Lingen's deaths had nothing to do with the auction house, but the Shao family wants to settle the score with the auction house. This is bullying. The Shao family is very powerful. Don't they always bully others? What's so strange about that? The auction house is really unlucky this time. The Shao family has something on them. They're probably going to vomit blood this time. The Shao family controlled the entire 9 cold region, but there were a few other major forces. Even though they were not as powerful as the Shao family, they still had a certain amount of prestige and strength. The Tian family of the auction house was one of these major forces. In recent years, their momentum had been very strong, and they were faintly competing with the Shao family. The Shao family attacking the Tian family at this time was obviously to suppress the latter. What's wrong with bullying others? Shao Lingyuan heard the discussion of the people around him. He roared angrily and shouted, "Our Shao family wants to take advantage of our power to bully others. Do you have any objections?" As soon as he said that, the onlookers trembled in fear. No one dared to make a sound. The Shao family represented absolute power in the 9 cold region. The Shao family was the biggest rule in the 9 cold region. No one dared to disobey them. Tian Liang, I'll tell you directly. Today I'm going to make your auction house bleed. Shao Lingyuan was extremely insolent. He didn't avoid the taboo and directly shouted, You actually dare to rope in that silver-haired martial artist in front of me. If I don't knock you down a peg, you'll be riding on my Shao family's neck and taking a shit." As expected, Xiao Lingyuan was furious because Tian Liang tried to rope in Nye Tian yesterday. At this time, Xiao Lingyun already knew that everything happened because of Nye Tian. Xiao Feng was held hostage by Nye Tian, and Xiao Linghan was induced by Nye Tian to attack Lin Yi, which resulted in him being killed by Lin Yi. If it wasn't for Nye Tian, Xiao Feng and Xiao Linghan wouldn't have died. So today, he not only came for the Xiao family's auction house, but also for Nye Tian. "Today, I'm going to let everyone know who the real ruler of the Nine Cold region is." The more Xiao Lingyuan spoke, the more arrogant he became. He shouted at the onlookers and even released a huge oppressive aura to intimidate them. This was the insolence of the Xiao family. As the ruler of the Nine Cold region, they wouldn't allow anyone to provoke them. "Xiao Lingyuan, you're going too far." Tian Liang couldn't take it anymore. He shouted and shouted Xiao Lingyuan's name. Since Xiao Lingyuan was bullying people so openly, if he continued to tolerate it, he would be too useless. Actually, the Xiao family exploited other forces greatly. Take the Nine Cold auction house for example. 30% of the profits every year went to the Xiao family. It was completely free. Tian Liang had tolerated the Xiao family for a long time. This time, he decided not to tolerate it anymore. Chapter 1080. Above the spacious plaza, as Tian Liang's attitude became unyielding, the atmosphere of the entire plaza immediately became tense. "They're going to fight." The crowd's gazes trembled. Everyone could smell the thick smell of gunpowder. The Xiao family martial artists and the auction venue's people all became nervous. A moment of carelessness, and it would be a bloody battle. "Tian Liang, looks like you want to fight with my Xiao family." Xiao Lingyuan smiled coldly, a sharp cold light surging in his eyes. What he wanted was to infuriate Tian Liang. As long as the auction venue's people dared to make a move against the Xiao family, there would only be one outcome: death. Tian Liang felt the killing intent from Xiao Lingyuan's entire body, and his brows furrowed suddenly. He instantly understood that the latter wanted to infuriate him and force him to make a move. "Xiao family head, what do you want?" Tian Liang suppressed the anger in his heart and said solemnly. Although he did not fear Xiao Lingyuan, the Xiao family still had several ancestor-level figures. It was rumored that they were all third-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Any one of them was sufficient to exterminate the auction venue. The reason why the Xiao family could dominate the Nine Cold region was that the family's foundation was deep, with ancestor-level figures holding down the fort. If not for these ancestors, the Xiao family would not be much different from the other factions. "What? Want to negotiate terms with this family head again?" Xiao Lingyuan's sinister gaze swept over Tian Liang, his face full of disdain, insolent to the extreme. Tian Liang clenched his fists tightly, suppressing the rage in his heart. His body could not help but tremble slightly as he said solemnly, "Xiao family head, state your terms." Tian Liang knew that he could not avoid today's matter. Might as well be straightforward and save trouble. At this moment, Tian Chichi was constantly looking around as if she was waiting for someone to arrive. But Tian Liang shook his head slightly. He knew that Tian Chichi was waiting for Nye Tian. But what could Nye Tian do even if he came? He roped in Nye Tian indeed, had the intention of contending against the Xiao family. But he did not expect that Xiao Lingyuan was actually arrogant to this extent, directly bringing a large number of Xiao family martial artists over and surrounding the auction venue. Even if Nye Tian came at this time, could it be that the auction venue dared to start a war with the Xiao family? Xiao Lingyuan and the others weren't scary. What was scary was the old ancestor of the Xiao family. If the old ancestor of the Xiao family was angered, the auction house would be completely destroyed. Therefore, Tian Liang's current plan was to swallow this anger and discuss it later. "Tian Liang, this patriarch's conditions are very simple. Xiao Lingyuan smiled coldly. His eyes were full of disdain and mockery. He said loudly, "From now on, the Jiuliang auction house belongs to the Xiao family. Tianjia, get out of Jiuliang City, and never set foot in the Jiuliang region again." As the cold voice fell, it was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone's faces turned sluggish, and they couldn't believe their ears at all. Who would have thought that Xiao Lingyuan's conditions would be so harsh? This was completely forcing Tianjia onto the road to death. Everyone turned to look at Tianliang, waiting to see how she would react. "Xiao Lingyuan, you've gone too far." Tianliang's fists were clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. His entire body's violent rage suddenly erupted as he roared furiously. At this time, he finally understood that Xiao Lingyuan didn't bring so many people to the auction house to discuss conditions with him at all. The Xiao family had already made up their minds to exterminate Tianjia and the auction house. Gone too far. Xiao Lingyuan raised his eyebrows. His attitude was extremely arrogant. He smiled coldly and said, "Tianliang, it was you who asked me to state the conditions. Now that I've mentioned them, you're unwilling. It seems that you really want to start a war with the Xiao family. Since that's the case, let's fight." As the last two words fell, Xiao Lingyuan's entire body rose up with a frightening aura. Cold killing intent was released and directly enveloped Tianliang. He didn't come here today to discuss conditions with Tianliang. He came to kill. Kill! The next moment, all the warriors of the Xiao family released their powerful aura and roared in unison. The violent killing intent condensed into a substance, like an invisible giant hand, pressing down on the warriors of the auction house. Everyone in the auction house felt the enormous pressure. Suddenly, their chests sank, and many people vomited blood on the spot. The Xiao family had more than 100 warriors of the 9th level of the Heaven Being realm. Their aura merged into one. The degree of terror could be imagined. Pfft! Tianqiqi's face turned red. Finally, she couldn't bear the pressure anymore. Her body trembled, and she vomited a mouthful of blood. She took a few steps back and almost fell. "Qiqi!" Tianliang cried out in alarm. In a flash, he rushed forward to support Tianqiqi. "Go to hell!" Just then, killing intent flashed in Xiao Lingyuan's eyes. With a roar, he directly slammed his palm. The violent palm force pressed down, and the terrifying aura bloomed, covering Tianliang. Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes suddenly trembled. No one expected that the dignified Xiao family head would sneak an attack. Tianliang felt a huge force coming toward him. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. If this palm strike landed on him, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. "You're courting death." At the moment of imminent peril, an ice-cold voice rang out. After that, an extremely sharp sword shadow slashed down, bringing with it a terrifying killing intent. Xiao Lingyuan was stunned. He looked up and saw the sword shadow falling. The great fear in his eyes instantly turned into despair. Rumble! In the next instant, the horrifying sword shadow directly fell. Not only did it block the terrifying palm for Tianliang, it even directly landed on Xiao Lingyuan's body. Xiao Lingyuan's eyes suddenly widened, his mouth opened very wide, but he could not emit any sound. The instant the horrifying sword intent bloomed, Xiao Lingyuan's body was directly drowned in the sword intent. He did not even have time to let out a scream on his deathbed. The crowd's gazes suddenly turned sluggish, fixed on that figure in the void. The wind blew, his silver hair fluttering. It was precisely Nie Tian. Xiao Lingyuan never thought that at the same time he sneak attacked Tianliang, he was actually also sneak attacked by Nie Tian. The dignified Xiao family head, a second-level heavenly emperor martial artist, did not even have the chance to cry out in the end and directly died tragically on the spot, making people sigh. This sword, although Nie Tian took the advantage of sneak attacking, his strength was placed there. Even if he did not sneak attack, he could kill Xiao Lingyuan too. It was just that he needed to expend some means. The crowd's gazes turned sluggish, looking at Nie Tian dumbfoundedly, unable to react for a long time. The Xiao family head was one-shot by someone with one sword. Such a scene was too shocking. Lord Nie Tian. Tian Liang looked at Nie Tian's figure, his expression aghast, still in a state of shock. Fortunately, Nie Tian made a move in time. Otherwise, he would have died tragically under Xiao Lingyuan's palm. Tian Chichi looked at Nie Tian with a grateful look. While at this time, those Xiao family martial artists were completely stunned, looking at Nie Tian in a daze, slowly becoming alarmed and terrified. Nie Tian's strength was too powerful. It was not what they could contend with at all. Nie Tian stood in the void, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly, but he opened his mouth to a stretch of void and said, "If I didn't guess wrongly, you're the Xiao family's old ancestor, right? The Xiao family head is already dead, are you still not coming out?" The crowd was stunned, not knowing who Nie Tian was talking to. Chapter 1081. In the void, a gray-robed figure appeared. The crowd immediately froze, their faces lifeless. No one could have thought that there was actually a person hidden in the void. That gray-robed figure was very old, his face full of wrinkles, his body stooped, like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. But this old man's eyes were very sharp, releasing a blade-like sharp aura. What made people even stranger was that this old man's aura was clearly restrained, but it gave people a mountain-like oppressive aura. But these were not the most surprising thing. The most shocking thing was that this gray-robed figure was actually a woman. She's the Xiao family's old ancestor? At this time, someone recalled Nie Tian's words just now. His gaze trembled, and he cried out in surprise. Who could have thought that the legendary Xiao family's old ancestor was actually a female martial artist? But the next instant, those Xiao family's martial artists knelt on the ground in unison and shouted loudly, with a great commotion. That was right, this old man was none other than precisely the Xiao family's old ancestor, Xiao Shuanghan. Xiao Shuanghan turned around slightly, his gaze sweeping across everyone. A chill immediately welled up in everyone's hearts, as if falling into an ice cellar. Tian Liang and Tian Chichi, father and daughter, knew that the Xiao family's old ancestor appeared. Their eyes involuntarily trembled, filled with terror. Xiao Shuanghan's gaze turned around, finally landing on Nie Tian. An aged voice sounded out and said, "Young man, you can actually discover this old body's existence. It truly surprises this old body. Your strength actually reached 3rd level Heavenly Emperor. This also makes me very surprised." Nie Tian responded coolly. Although he said he was surprised verbally, his eyes revealed a heart-palpitating calmness. Nie Tian possessed the eyes of the starry sky and also had the holographic divine vestige. Anyone who was lurking within several hundred meters around him, he could discover them. He sensed Xiao Shuanghan's existence right from the start. It was just that he did not say it all along. Even when he made a move against Xiao Lingyuan, he was constantly on guard against Xiao Shuanghan. Actually, thinking about it, it was also clear that Xiao Lingyuan had long witnessed Nie Tian's strength. If there was no one supporting him from behind, how could he dare to come to the auction venue so brazenly? 3rd level Heavenly Emperor. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, their gazes trembled fiercely. Immediately, countless sounds of gulping sounded out. In the rumors, the Xiao family's old ancestors were a group of peak 2nd level Heavenly Emperor old monsters. But now, the one who appeared in front of everyone was a 3rd level Heavenly Emperor super strong martial artist. How could this not surprise people? "Young man, it seems that you have a very strong perception." Xiao Shuanghan's old face changed slightly. She had not changed her expression for hundreds of years. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "My perception abilities are far above your expectations. There are still 2 3rd level Heavenly Emperor martial artists behind you. If I were to fight with you, they would wait for an opportunity to ambush me. Am I right? This time, Xiao Shuanghan's aged pupils suddenly shrank, and his face revealed a look of horror. He could no longer hide the surprise in his heart. There are two more people? When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they were instantly stunned. They looked at the void in terror, but they could not see or sense anything. Xiao Shuanghan's face darkened. His hoarse voice sounded, "You two, come out." "Yes, big sister." Immediately, the void swayed slightly. Two figures appeared. They were actually female martial artists too. Furthermore, their appearances were very similar to Xiao Shuanghan. Nie Tian's gaze swept across the three people and could not help smiling in his heart. Turns out that the Xiao family's old ancestor is three women. Furthermore, they are triplets. Big sister, this punk killed the Xiao family's disciples. Let us attack together and kill him. A person behind Xiao Shuanghan opened his mouth coldly. His gaze when looking at Nie Tian carried thick, killing intent. Tian Liang raised her head and glanced at that person who spoke, bean-sized beads of sweat seeping out of her forehead. If Nie Tian was killed, the entire auction venue would suffer a calamity too. Third sister, you step down. Unexpectedly, Xiao Shuanghan opened her mouth coldly and made that person step down. Immediately, Xiao Shuanghan looked at Nie Tian, her gaze sharp, but she did not speak. Clearly, she was judging Nie Tian's strength. Nie Tian stood in the void and did not speak. He waited for Xiao Shuanghan to speak. After a while, Xiao Shuanghan finally opened her mouth and said, "Young man, your martial arts talent is very strong. I have never seen anything like it in my life. I want to." "Just say it." Before Xiao Shuanghan could finish, Nie Tianling interrupted him coldly. The cultivators of the Xiao family looked at Nie Tian angrily. Obviously, they disliked Nie Tian for interrupting the old ancestor of the Xiao family. Xiao Shuanghan smiled lightly. She was not angry at all. She said, "I will make a gentleman's promise to you. You and I will fight. If I win, you hand over the 8 Desolation Ghost Bone and ask the people of the Jiliang auction house to leave the Jiliang region and never come back. If you win, the Xiao family will not pursue what happened before. The people of the Xiao family will also leave the Jiliang region and never come back. What do you think?" Hearing Xiao Shuanghan's words, everyone present was stunned. No one could have thought that she would actually offer such a good condition. The 3 old ancestors of the Xiao family showed up. They were all 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor strength. No matter what, they could also kill Nie Tian. Why would Xiao Shuanghan need to make this kind of deal with Nie Tian? A gentleman's promise, is it? The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. A hint of a strange look flashed across in his eyes. Following that, he looked at Tian Liang and said, "Lord Tian Liang, can I make a decision on behalf of the auction house? I'm willing to listen to Lord Nie Tian's arrangements." Tian Liang's expression was ugly as he nodded his head solemnly. Right now, Tian Jia was already riding a tiger and finding it hard to dismount. He could only entrust his hopes on Nie Tian. Tian Liang's heart was very heavy. Even if Nie Tian's opponent was only Xiao Shuanghan alone, he also did not feel that Nie Tian had any chances of winning. After all, Xiao Shuanghan was 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor strength, but Tian Jia already had no way out. He must bet on Nie Tian. Very good. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His gaze flickered a little, and he said to Xiao Shuanghan, "Since Lord Tian Liang agrees, I naturally can't shrink back. This gentleman's promise, I agree to it." "Okay." Xiao Shuanghan nodded his head heavily. Then, his gaze turned to the Xiao family's martial artists and said, "This battle is a fair battle between this old one and this young man. No matter what the outcome is, the Xiao family's people. Enough nonsense, let's begin." At this time, not waiting for Xiao Shuanghan to finish talking, Nie Tian directly interrupted her again, his eyes revealing thick contempt. A cold light flashed in Xiao Shuanghan's eyes, but he suppressed his anger. Following that, he squeezed out a hint of a smile and said, "Since your excellency is so anxious, This old one won't stand on ceremony. The moment the voice faded, Xiao Shuanghen's entire body's aura soared. A withered yellow towering tree actually appeared behind him. It did not have half a leaf, only swaying branches. It was like one sharp claw after another, extending towards the sky as if wanting to tear the sky apart. Following the appearance of that towering tree, a boundless aura spread out. The crowd on the ground felt their chests stifled and immediately retreated one after another. Chapter 1082. Xiao Shuanghen's entire body released his aura, directly using the giant spirit true body. The horrifying aura of the withered giant tree spread above the void. One after another, the branches danced wildly like tentacles, as if wanting to tear the space apart. Giant spirit true body. When the crowd saw this scene, their gazes trembled incessantly, shock in their hearts. Xiao Shuanghen's move was determined to succeed. He must defeat or even kill Nie Tian. It's over. Tian Liang looked at the withered giant tree in the air. His face fell, directly turning deathly pale. Xiao Shuanghen was third-level Heavenly Emperor strength, and actually used the giant spirit true body. How could Nie Tian still have any chance? But in the void, Nie Tian's face was as calm as water, without any ripples, calm to the extreme. Young man, reveal your giant spirit true body then. Xiao Shuanghen's murderous eyes stared at Nie Tian and said coldly. But Nie Tian shook his head at this time and said with a smile, "Dealing with you, I still don't need the giant spirit true body." When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they were stunned one after another, their pupils opened wide, stunned until they could not speak. Xiao Shuanghen did not even have the qualifications to let Nie Tian use the giant spirit true body. The latter was also too arrogant. "Stinking brat, you're courting death." This time, Xiao Shuanghen could not tolerate it anymore. With a fierce roar, the aura of her entire body skyrocketed. She was the Xiao family's old ancestor, the true controller of the Nine Cold region. But Nie Tian interrupted her time and time again. Now, he actually started to despise her. If she continued to endure, she would definitely endure until someone died. Withered tree hand. The next instant, Xiao Shuanghen's figure suddenly moved. The withered giant tree behind her swayed violently. The void immediately trembled. The surrounding space within several thousand meters was pulled by a tremendous force, instantly tightening. "Die for me." Xiao Shuanghen put away her pretentious posture. A sharp voice came out. The withered giant tree behind her pressed over with a loud bang. Countless branches intertwined together, condensing into a giant withered tree hand in the air. Boom! The void trembled violently. Immediately, a tremendous force was released, pressing over towards Nie Tian. What a terrifying aura! Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes trembled violently and the fear in their hearts was revealed on their faces. At this time, Nie Tian was standing in the sky. He didn't look at Xiao Shuanghen. Instead, he stared at the other two ancestors in the distance. "Go to hell, you stinking brat!" Suddenly, two other voices rang out at the same time, superimposed over each other. It was none other than the two patriarchs. The moment their voices fell, the two of them made their moves at the same time. It was the same move as Xiao Shuanghen. The three of them were triplets, and their awakened primordial spirits were the same. Boom! 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 Before the crowd could react, three withered wood hands appeared in the void and pressed down on Nie Tian at the same time. Crack! 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 The moment the three giant hands pressed down, a terrifying aura burst out. The ground thousands of meters below couldn't bear the pressure and crack. "It's over. That silver-haired brat is dead." The crowd's eyes trembled and they cried in their hearts. If Xiao Shuanghen attacked alone, Nie Tian might have a chance to survive. However, with three patriarchs attacking together, Nie Tian would definitely die. Nobody expected that the patriarchs of the Xiao family would break their promise. Nie Tian stood in the air, surrounded by a terrible sword will. His whole body was like a sharp sword that could tear everything apart at any time. Humph! Facing the joint attack of the three patriarchs of the Shao family, Nie Tian didn't show any fear or surprise. He just whispered, "Is this your gentleman's promise?" Nie Tian didn't take the so-called gentleman's promise seriously from the very beginning. It was just a trick used by Shao Shuanghen to confuse him. The moment he saw the three sisters of the Shao family, he knew that they were all cruel and merciless. How could they make a gentleman's promise to him? Especially Shao Shuanghen, who had been putting on airs all the time. Did she think that Nie Tian was a 3-year-old child? Shao Shuanghen had been evaluating Nie Tian's strength. She must have thought that his strength was too strange, and she didn't have absolute confidence. That was why she made a gentleman's promise. Since he had already seen through Shao Shuanghen's plot, how could Nie Tian not be prepared? The beast of chaos can't wait any longer. Just as the three giant hands were about to fall, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. Then his body trembled, and a terrible red halo gushed out of his body. Roar! In an instant, a 2,000-meter-long red beast appeared behind him. It let out a furious roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The dazzling red light spread in the void, and the whole sky seemed to be covered with a layer of red curtain. People couldn't look at it directly. The giant red beast was Nie Tian's giant spirit true body, the beast of chaos. Nie Tian hadn't used the giant spirit true body for a long time. When he used it again, his strength had reached the heavenly emperor realm, and he could exert the power of the giant spirit true body. When the crowd saw the giant red beast behind Nie Tian, they were stunned. No words or actions could express the shock in their hearts. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that there was such a terrifying giant spirit true body in the world. When the 2,000-meter-tall behemoth appeared, the entire world seemed to have shrunk. That angry roar seemed to be declaring that it was the absolute ruler of this part of the sky. When Shao Shuanghen and the others saw Nie Tian suddenly release the giant spirit true body, they were stunned at first, and their hearts trembled for a moment. But then Shao Shuanghen's mouth curled into a cold smile, and she said in a low voice, "You fool, don't you think it's too late to use the giant spirit true body now?" Nie Tian's giant spirit true body was indeed very terrifying. Even under the situation where her strength was 2 levels higher than Nie Tian's, Shao Shuanghen still felt a strong sense of fear, and an uncontrollable fear arose in her heart. But Nie Tian didn't use the giant spirit true body immediately, and he had already lost the initiative to attack. Even if he released it now, he could only endure the pain and be beaten. Shao Shuanghen didn't care about some ridiculous gentleman's promise. As long as she had the initiative, she would definitely not stop until Nie Tian was completely annihilated. Too late. Nie Tian looked up slightly, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he spat out 2 words in a low voice. At this time, the beast of chaos opened its huge mouth, and a dazzling white ball of light appeared. It was the star light ball. Nie Tian knew about Shao Shuanghen's plot, so how could he not prepare some tricks? 9th level chaos beast, destroy them, Nie Tian said calmly. His expression was calm, but his eyes were filled with the most terrifying killing intent. Roar! The beast of chaos's huge body trembled, and it roared to the sky. In an instant, the star light ball exploded, and thousands of dazzling white lights rushed in all directions like a raging wave. Chi chi chi! The power of the morning star daybreak turned into white sharp blades, bombarding the 3 huge withered wood hands, and there was a piercing sound of explosion. Bang! 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 The withered wood hands couldn't withstand the impact of the starlight ball, and they actually exploded from the impact. 3 violent tearing sounds rang out, and the 3 withered wood hands suddenly collapsed. Chapter 1083. Above the void, amidst the glaring white light, 3 figures flew out backward, drawing blood-colored traces in the air. The powerful aura of the 9th extreme chaos beast, plus the tremendous impact force of morning star daybreak, the 3 Shao family old ancestors were actually unable to withstand this kind of power and were directly impacted until they flew out backward. When the crowd saw this scene, their expressions were astounded to the extreme, indescribable shock surging in their hearts. Who could have thought that Nye Tian, who was originally facing certain death, actually released the Titan true body in an instant? That kind of aura that broke through everything and looked down on the world made people's hearts surge, their blood boiling. Also, that glaring white light was like a sky full of sharp blades, directly shattering the attacks of the three Shao family old ancestors and even seriously injuring the three people. The inconceivable scene in the void was simply shocking like a dream, making people feel that it was extremely unreal. Kill! Right at this time, a cold and austere voice sounded out. Nye Tian's figure shot up to the sky, like a sharp sword, sharp and incisive, practically about to slice the void apart. Roar! The ninth extreme chaos beast roared at the sky, its enormous body actually sprinting wildly. Crimson flames surged on its body. Circles of crimson halos surged in the air like ripples, reflecting the entire stretch of sky crimson red, like a magnificent sunset glow, magnificent and beautiful. But amidst this gorgeous and colorful scenery, it was filled with the most terrifying killing intent. The Tier 9 Chaos Beast's body was huge, but its speed was extremely fast. The crimson wings behind it spread out, like two crimson rays of sunset glow falling from the void. Above the horizon, a crimson trajectory appeared, descending with a loud bang. A tremendous might surged out, turning into a crimson impact force, rolling down like raging waves. Xiao Shuanghen was in the void, but her body was out of control. She watched helplessly as the blood-colored berserk force pressed down, the horror in her eyes instantly turning into despair. She could never have thought that she would actually die in Nye Tian's hands. Nye Tian seemed to have long known everything and made preparations in advance. 3 third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists joining hands, using the power of the Titan True Body, and actually lost at the hands of a first-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Such a thing was bizarre and shocking. But at this time, everything was already too late. The crimson chi wave fell down like a flame. After a bloody light, the bodies of Xiao Shuanghen and the other 2 people were directly submerged, and no bones were left. Just like that, the 3 Shao family patriarchs died. Not even their bodies were left behind. Nye Tian stood tall in the air, smiling faintly as he retracted his aura. The 9th level Chaos Beast let out another loud roar, shaking the heavens and earth. After that, its huge body turned into a red light and disappeared. The crimson color in the sky disappeared, and the void returned to normal as if nothing had happened. But the difference was that the 3 ancestors of the Shao family were gone forever. The huge cracks on the ground proved that they had made a move. Everyone's gazes were focused on the silver-haired young man in the air. Their eyes were filled with great shock, surprise, respect, fear, and worship. All sorts of emotions intertwined to form complicated expressions, causing them to appear infatuated. Nye Tian's strength was too terrifying. The 3 ancestors of the Shao family, the strongest foundation of the Shao family, were so weak in front of Nye Tian. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Nye Tian's gaze swept across the crowd below. His expression did not change at all. He was calm and indifferent. He knew that the reason he had been able to kill the 3 Shao family patriarchs was partly because of the strength of the 9th level Chaos Beast and the terrifying impact of the Morning Star Daybreak. On the other hand, it was also because of the carelessness of Xiao Shuanghen and the others. They never dreamed that Nye Tian's strength would be so terrifying. And the third aspect was equally important. That was that even though Xiao Shuanghen 3 people were all 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists, they were far from being as powerful as ordinary 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists, because they were already 900 over years old, practically reaching the limits of their lifespans. The limit of a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist's lifespan was 900 to 1,000 years. But once one reached the limit of their lifespan, their martial body would weaken, and their essence meridians and spirit would also weaken. Hence, Xiao Shuanghan three people's actual combat strength was not much stronger than second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists, even if they reached the pinnacle, ultimately had a limit to their lifespan. Once the limit was reached, no matter how heaven-defying one's talent was, one would also be powerless to reverse the situation. It was precisely because of this that peak Heavenly Emperor martial artists had to assault the legendary deity realm ceaselessly. Only by reaching the deity realm could one break through the limits of lifespan. Killing the Xiao family's three old ancestors, Nie Tian's figure slowly descended, landing beside Tian Liang and Tian Qiqi father and daughter. But the latter two had blank expressions, looking at Nie Tian in a daze, unable to utter a word for a long time. Tian Liang already prepared for the worst, but what presented in front of him was the best situation. This kind of enormous surprise from hell to heaven caught him by surprise. Lord Tian Liang. Nie Tian looked at Tian Liang and spoke solemnly. Only then did the latter react, nodding his head and answering. Nie Tian's gaze flickered and he said, "I'll leave the Xiao family's people to you to deal with. But I don't wish for them to leave the Nine Cold region." "Yes, I understand." Tian Liang nodded his head solemnly, his attitude respectful and deferential. Only all the way until this moment did he thoroughly understand how terrifying this silver-haired youth in front of him was. Of course, Tian Liang knew what Nie Tian meant. The latter didn't allow the Xiao family's people to leave the Nine Cold region because he was afraid that they would go to the Sumer world. With so many peak heavenly being martial artists, they would bring terrifying turmoil to the Sumeru world. Nie Tian nodded slightly, his gaze sweeping across the Xiao family's people. The latter all lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Lord Tian Liang. At this moment, Nie Tian originally wanted to leave, but he suddenly thought of something and said, "I want you to help me find something." "Please speak, Lord Nie Tian." Tian Liang bowed his head, full of respect. "I need some 3 lives grass, but it must be over 100 years old. Have you heard of it?" Nie Tian thought for a moment, then said. He just thought of this at the last minute, so he said it casually. After all, Tian Liang ran such a large auction house, and he had seen many things on a daily basis. 3 lives grass over 100 years old? Tian Liang was stunned. He clearly knew that 3 lives grass could only live for about 30 years. How could there be one that was over 100 years old? Actually, Nie Tian had already greatly lowered his requirements. In order to create an origin meridian for share, what he really needed was 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. However, he was afraid of scaring Tian Liang, so he said one that was over 100 years old. He thought that as long as there was 3 lives grass that was over 100 years old, he might be able to follow this clue and find more. If he was lucky, he might even find 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. Just remember this and help me ask around. Nie Tian didn't explain too much to Tian Liang. After saying this, he immediately left. His figure flickered a few times in the air, then completely disappeared. Tian Liang looked in the direction that Nie Tian had left in and frowned deeply. His face was full of doubt as he muttered, "Is there 3 lives grass that is over 100 years old in this world? Father." At this moment, Tian Qiqi also calmed down. She seemed to have thought of something and said, "Perhaps Elder Chen knows." Chapter 1084. Nie Tian went back to the Tian Palace and landed in the courtyard where Cher and Emorushi were. "Nie Tian, where did you go?" Emorushi asked when she saw Nie Tian suddenly arrive. She sensed energy fluctuations from his body, as if he had just fought with someone. "Took care of a small matter." Nie Tian smiled and didn't say much. The 3 ancestors and the head of the Xiao clan were dead. The Jiuliang auction house was powerful enough to take over Jiuliang city and replace the Xiao clan. As for the other forces, after seeing Nie Tian's methods, they wouldn't dare to compete with the Tian clan. After chatting with Emorushi for a while, Nie Tian told her to stay by Cher's side and not to leave. Nie Tian said that not only to let Imo-rushi protect Cher, but also to make sure that the saint's mark in her body wouldn't be activated. There seemed to be a strange power within Snow's body that could suppress some of the sinister energies. After leaving Imo-rushi's courtyard, Nie Tian went to see Ni Jianming. The latter was much better and would be fine after a few days of rest. Nie Tian, are you going to the Heaven World's sacred region? In the courtyard, Lin Feng frowned and looked worried. Of course, said Nie Tian, smiling indifferently. He knew that Lin Feng was worried about Lin Yi. Lin Yi was a threat to him. However, Nie Tian had to go to the Heaven World's sacred region. How could he give up just because of Lin Yi? Although Lin Yi was the reincarnation of an ancient blood beast king, he didn't know that. Nie Tian had to kill him before he completely recovered his memories. Moreover, Nie Tian was also very interested in the hidden dragon Imperial Meridian. He was looking forward to the power of the fusion of dual supreme meridians. Be careful. Lin Feng knew that Nie Tian wasn't the kind of person who could be easily persuaded. Once the latter had decided, he wouldn't change his mind. Lin Feng didn't say much and just reminded him. Nie Tian slightly nodded. Lin Feng was an extremely sincere person. His sword heart was pure and untainted by anything. Even though Lin Feng knew that he was a member of Mingjian Mountain Village, and that Mingjian Mountain Village had been destroyed by the celestial demon cult, Lin Feng still remained calm. But Lin Yi, who was Lin Feng's brother, was completely different. Lin Yi was a cruel and merciless person who would do anything to achieve his goals. The two brothers, born of the same mother, had gone to two different extremes. One could not help but sigh. Perhaps it was because Lin Yi was the reincarnation of a blood demon king. The hatred accumulated over many lifetimes had a heavy influence on his heart. Nie Tian looked at Lin Feng with worry in his eyes. Lin Feng's sword heart was pure, he was talented, he was determined, but he had a fatal weakness, Lin Yi. It seemed like Lin Feng still hadn't thought about how to face his brother. Lin Feng, I hope that Lin Yi won't become a demon in your heart, thought Nie Tian, frowning. In the next few days, Nie Tian and the others stayed in the Tian family's residence. Nie Tian had already decided that as soon as Ni Jianming recovered, they would return to Holy Light City and then enter the Heaven World from the Zhejiang region. 3 days later, Nie Tian came out of his room. He was exhausted. He had been practicing the soul-devouring sword formation and wanted to comprehend the soul-devouring sword intent. Unfortunately, he had not succeeded. Don't worry, I already have the soul-devouring sword formation. It's only a matter of time before I comprehend the soul-devouring sword intent. Nie Tian smiled and comforted himself. If Elder Jian heard what he said, the latter would definitely jump up. What did he mean by a matter of time? Elder Jian had been comprehending it for hundreds of thousands of years, and there was no progress at all. Master Nie Tian. Just as he was about to go out of the courtyard to see Ni Jianming's situation, Tian Liang's figure appeared with an unconcealable joy on her face. Nie Tian smiled slightly. The Tian family was about to replace the Shao family's position. Of course, Tian Liang was very happy. Master Nie Tian, there is some progress on the thing you wanted. Tian Liang walked over with a strange look in her eyes. She was very excited. Nie Tian was stunned at first, but then he reacted and his eyes instantly became passionate. Tian Liang was saying that there was news about the 100-year 3 lives grass. Nie Tian's expression stiffened for a few seconds. This was too fast. He had just told Tian Liang about the 3 lives grass a few days ago, and the latter had news so quickly. She was indeed someone from the auction house. Previously, Nie Tian had only mentioned it casually. He didn't expect Tian Liang to really help him inquire about it, and so quickly. Lord Nie Tian, I've already asked someone who knows where to find 3 lives grass that's over 100 years old. However, he wants you to meet him in person. Tian Liang calmed down a bit and said with a somewhat embarrassed tone. Okay, I will go see him immediately. Nie Tian said without hesitation. As long as there was news about the 100-year 3 lives grass, he might be able to find the 1,000-year 3 lives grass, or even the 10,000-year 3 lives grass. That was something that could help create an elemental meridian. How could Nie Tian not be excited? Immediately, Nie Tian didn't delay and followed Tian Liang to a remote place in Jiliang City. That person lives here? Nie Tian looked at the thatched hut in front of him. The surroundings were barren and overgrown with weeds. He could smell the pungent smell of alcohol from hundreds of meters away. If Tian Liang didn't bring him here, he would have thought that he had entered an unmarked graveyard. Yes. Tian Liang nodded and said, Master Nie Tian, this mister has a strange temper. If he speaks rudely, please forgive him. That's fine, as long as he doesn't lie to me. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His experience from his previous life told him that those with true strength all had strange tempers. Tian Liang came to a stop about 10 meters away from the thatched cottage and called out respectfully, Senior Chen, Lord Nie Tian is here. Can we come in? Nie Tian couldn't help but be puzzled. The Tian family had replaced the Xiao family and Tian Liang was the master of Jiliang City. Yet, he was so respectful to this person. It seemed that this person had some background. Come in. A loud voice came from the thatched hut. It seemed that the person was a little drunk and muttered, I, Old Chen, want to see who dares to call himself Nie Tian. And? When Nie Tian heard that person's words, his eyes slightly narrowed. Then, he used his divine sense to sense the person. His face suddenly changed and he spat out a name, Chen Jini. Tian Liang suddenly looked at Nie Tian and was stunned. He said in surprise, Master Nie Tian knows Elder Chen? The person in the thatched hut was Chen Jini. The people of Jiliang City called him Elder Chen. Very few people knew Elder Chen's real name. Nie Tian actually called out Elder Chen's name. It was very strange. However, at this time, Nie Tian's face was stiff. His eyes were a little blurred. His eyes were surging with unconcealable surprise and passion. Drunkard Chen, why are you in Jiliang City? Nie Tian was surprised and his face showed unconcealable excitement. Chen Jini, this name was too familiar. He was one of his best friends in his previous life and one of the 7 great elders of the God Realm Alchemist Guild. Just now, when Nie Tian smelled the pungent smell of alcohol, he had an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He used his divine sense to investigate, and it was indeed a familiar person. Chapter 1085. Outside the thatched hut, Nie Tian's expression stiffened for a few seconds before he finally relaxed. The expression in his eyes became somewhat complicated. Lord Nie Tian, are you all right? Tian Liang thought that Nie Tian was angry. His expression couldn't help but turn awkward as he explained, Old Chen doesn't have any ill intentions. He's just, let's go in. Without waiting for Tian Liang to finish speaking, Nie Tian directly stepped into the thatched hut. Pushing the door open, Nie Tian was stunned by the scene in front of him. The thatched hut that was only a dozen square meters in size was extremely messy. Broken wine jars were everywhere. A slightly hunched old man was half lying on the ground. His eyes were drunk and blurry. He was holding a wine jar in his hand. When he saw Nie Tian coming in, he actually laughed mischievously. He raised the wine jar and said, Come, let's drink another jar. Nie Tian clearly saw the face of the old man in front of him. Although he had aged a lot, he could still recognize that the latter was his best friend in his previous life. One of the 7 great elders of the God Realm Alchemist Guild, Chen Jini. But the current Chen Jini didn't have the slightest bit of elegance from back then. He had completely turned into a sloppy old drunkard. Back then in the Heaven Realm, Nie Tian and Chen Jini were good friends in alchemy. The two of them often discussed alchemy together. At that time, Chen Jini was handsome and elegant. He was one of the few people in the Heaven Realm who became a 9th-rank alchemist before the age of 100. Although Chen Jini was addicted to alcohol, He never got drunk. Moreover, he paid special attention to his appearance. Nye Tian even joked that he was a drunkard with misophobia. Compared to the sloppy old man in front of him, he was like a completely different person. Chen Genie. Seeing Chen Genie in front of him, Nye Tian's expression changed. His body swayed slightly as if he was struck by lightning. He suddenly roared. The deep roar fell and a huge power was released. The thatched hut was directly overturned. The glaring sunlight shone down and fell on Chen Genie's body. He covered his eyes with his hands and looked very panicked, as though he had not seen sunlight for a long time. Lord Nye Tian, this. Tian Liang was stunned for a second, and then a frightened look appeared on her face. She didn't know why Nye Tian suddenly became angry. Chen Genie had been hiding in the thatched hut for decades, and it was said that he had never come out. Now that Nye Tian had suddenly destroyed his thatched hut, how could this be? Leave first. Without my order, no one is allowed to approach this place. Nye Tian glanced at Tian Liang and said in a deep voice. Yes, yes, yes. Tian Liang didn't know what was going on and was completely at a loss. However, when he saw how furious Nye Tian was, he didn't dare to stay for even a moment longer. He nodded repeatedly and disappeared. You, who are you? At this time, Chen Genie covered his eyes with one hand to prevent them from being hurt by the sunlight. He looked at Nye Tian in panic, his voice trembling. I am the person who dares to call myself Nye Tian. Nye Tian took a step forward and directly came in front of Chen Genie. He stared straight at the latter and said word by word, Chen Genie, look clearly, who am I? Chen Genie was suddenly stunned. His eyes suddenly widened and revealed great confusion in his eyes. You are. Slowly, his face became frightened and shocked. The muscles on his face started to twitch uncontrollably. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say them no matter what. This look, this aura, Chen Genie was too familiar with it. I am Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes flashed with unrestrained anger, and he almost roared out. Nye Tian, Nye Tian, Nye Tian. Chen Genie finally reacted. As if he had just woken up from a dream, his mouth kept repeating Nye Tian's name. His eyes flashed with excitement as he said, You didn't die, you actually didn't die. As he spoke, Chen Genie finally stood up and hugged Nye Tian like a child. He actually burst into tears. After a long time, Chen Genie finally calmed down. Looking at Nye Tian's face, he smiled foolishly. His eyes were filled with tears as he said, Nye Tian, you're really still alive. I'm still alive. Nye Tian nodded and smiled. Being able to see a friend from his previous life again made him feel as if it was a lifetime ago. Chen Genie, what exactly happened to your body? Who made you like this? Suddenly, a terrifying anger flashed in Nye Tian's eyes as he asked in a deep voice. The current Chen Genie and the person in Nye Tian's memory were worlds apart. Chen Genie was a Tier 9 alchemist, but his strength was not strong. He was only in the heaven tier. Nye Tian knew that his age was only 200-something years old. This age for a heaven tier martial artist was equivalent to youth. But Chen Genie had a completely aged appearance. Nye Tian sensed for a bit. Chen Genie's strength had actually dropped. He was only in the first level of true essence. Chen Genie was a person who loved cleanliness very much. But now, he had become a drunkard old man. This extreme contrast made Nye Tian very angry. Someone must have done something to Chen Genie. That was why he would appear here and become like this. Nye Tian, I'm fine, I'm really fine. As long as you're still alive, it's fine. We're still good friends and can still discuss alchemy Dao together. That's enough. Chen Genie shook his head vigorously but was unwilling to say more to Nye Tian. Was it Luo Chenhun who did it? Nye Tianling asked coldly, the fury in his entire body like a burning volcano. Even if Chen Genie did not say, he could also guess a thing or two. Chen Genie still did not say and just shook his head. He could sense that Nie Tian's strength was only at the first level of Heavenly Emperor. What could it do even if he said what happened to him? It would only make Nie Tian even more furious. Scoundrel! Nie Tian looked at Chen Jini's expression and knew that it must be Luo Chunhun who dealt a vicious blow to the latter. But what he could not understand was why the Alchemist Association did not care. Chen Jini was a Tier 9 alchemist. He himself was also one of the association's 7 great elders. He was even once considered to be the next Alchemist Association's chairman. Luo Chunhun laying his hands on Chen Jini, the Alchemist Association's people should have stopped it. What in the world is Chen Xinwen thinking? Why didn't he stop Luo Chunhun? When Nie Tian thought of this, his entire body was even more enraged, roaring out violently. Chen Xinwen was precisely the Divine Realm Alchemist Association's chairman. Chen Jini, this association elder, was dealt a vicious blow, but Chen Xinwen actually did not care. How could this not make Nie Tian furious? If the Alchemist Association could not protect alchemists, then what was the use of the association's existence? Nie Tian, let bygones be bygones. As long as you're still alive, nothing will change. Chen Jini already completely calmed down. The turbidity in his eyes disappeared, replacing it was a bright look. Nie Tian let out a long breath of turbid air and calmed down slightly. A terrifying chill flickered in his eyes as he said solemnly, "Some things can be bygones, but some things can never be bygones. The things that Luo Chunhun did, I'll get them back from him one by one." When the icy cold voice fell, the killing intent in Nie Tian's eyes gradually dissipated. Replacing it was an indelible determination. Even if Chen Jini was not willing to say the truth of the matter, Nie Tian would definitely find a way to investigate it too. Chapter 1086. Jiuliang City, Tianfu, in a small courtyard. Nie Tian and Chen Jini were sitting opposite each other. The latter had recovered some of his spirit and had changed into a white robe. Even though he was no longer as young as before, he still maintained his proper demeanor. Nie Tian, I quit drinking. Suddenly, Chen Jini looked at Nie Tian and said. Nie Tian was startled, then he laughed and teased. An old drunkard can also quit drinking? In the past, Chen Jini was addicted to alcohol, but he would never get drunk. However, after the fall of Nie Tian, he came to Jiuliang City for some reason and became a true drunkard. Him quitting drinking now represented a kind of determination, bidding farewell to his previous life. The Chen Jini of the past had returned. Chen Jini smiled and didn't say much. He suddenly thought of something and said, I heard from Madame Tian that you want to find 3 lives grass that is older than 100 years? Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He was too excited to reunite with an old friend and almost forgot about the 3 lives grass. How do you know there is 3 lives grass that is older than 100 years? Chen Jini smiled strangely and asked. I've seen it in ancient books. 3 lives grass is also known as the 9 lives demon cat. In ancient times there were even 3 lives grass that was older than 10,000 years. I have a friend who needs this kind of 3 lives grass. Nie Tian said faintly. He knew that Chen Jini was a strange guy who liked to study ancient medicine books when he had nothing to do. Moreover, he liked to go to places with few people to find medicinal ingredients. If there was someone who knew about 10,000 years 3 lives grass, it could only be him. Yes, I've also seen such records and even went to look for it. Chen Jini said faintly. Did you find it? Nie Tian's eyes flickered with passion. Chen Jini paused and said, I spent more than 10 years to go to the extreme north of Dongchuan Divine Realm. There is a place called Everlasting Eternity. I saw 3 lives grass that was older than 1,000 years there, but I didn't find any 3 lives grass that was older than 10,000 years. Everlasting Eternity. Hearing this place, Nie Tian's gaze couldn't help but tremble. He murmured, Isn't that where Dugunai is? Dongchuan sword evil Dugunai? Chen Jini was stunned for a moment. He had also heard of the name Duguanai. Nye Tian nodded and said, Duguanai is in the everlasting heaven desolate domain. I've been there before and had a spar with him. Chen Genie smiled faintly. Of course, he knew that in his previous life, Nye Tian's talent in alchemy aside, his talent in martial arts and swordsmanship was also top-notch. Moreover, he was a swordsman on par with Duguan. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said in his heart, Looks like I need to make a trip to the everlasting eternity. He did not expect that a barren place like the everlasting land would have 3 lives grass that was over 1,000 years old. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. It was precisely this kind of barren land that could stimulate the 3 lives grass' extraordinary vitality. Since the everlasting eternity had 3 lives grass that was over 1,000 years old, then it was very likely that there would be 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. Thinking of this, the corners of Nye Tian's mouth couldn't help but rise. It seemed that there was hope of creating an essence meridian for share. Following that, Nye Tian and Chen Genie chatted for another day. The joy of reuniting with old friends was not something that others could understand. The next morning, the figures of Nye Tian and the others appeared at the gate of Tian Tian Manor. They were preparing to leave. Nye Tian decided to first return to the Holy Light region to visit Li Yi, Nye Yuro, and the others. Then, he would get the illusory flower blood lotus for Mo Rushi. After that, he would return to the 9 cold region and directly go to the everlasting eternity. Nye Tian gave the 9 demon dragon spirit cores to Chen Genie and asked the latter to refine 9 7 transformation dragon heart pills. Right now, Nye Tian also had rank 91 mental energy and could also refine rank 9 spirit pills. However, Chen Genie's mental energy was already at rank 97, so he was more confident in refining rank 9 spirit pills. Hence, he gave the demon dragon spirit cores to the latter. Chen Genie, I will be back in a month at most. I hope that you will have refined the 7 transformation dragon heart pills by then. Nye Tian looked at Chen Genie and smiled faintly. Don't worry. Even if I don't refine pills for a few decades, I will not become rusty. I can refine the 7 transformation dragon heart pills in half a month. Chen Genie was very confident and said with confidence. Refining spirit pills for Nye Tian made him feel very good. In the past, the two of them were competitors. Now that Nye Tian asked him to refine spirit pills, it was obvious that he was indirectly admitting that his alchemy Tao was not as good as his. This made him very happy. Chen Genie, Tian Liang, and the others watched Nye Tian and the others leave with eyes full of anticipation. Tian Liang had never thought that a young cultivator from the Xumi world could completely change the situation in the Jiuliang region in a few days. This was the power of a strong cultivator. Without Nye Tian, the Tian clan would never have been able to replace the Shao clan. They might even have been chased out of the Jiuliang region. After Nye Tian and the others left Jiuliang City, they headed straight for the Holy Light region. Lin Feng did not return with Nye Tian. Instead, he stayed in the Jiuliang region and prepared to practice there. When he became a celestial emperor, he would also enter the heaven world's godly region. Half a month later, a group of people appeared in the Holy Light region. Nye Tian did not return to the Holy Light Imperial City directly. Instead, he took a detour to the Xianyu Empire and sent Ni Zichen and Ni Jiaming back to the Wind and Cloud Forbidden Land. Too many things had happened during this period of time. Ni Zichen had to inform the Dragon Rebel clan. After leaving the Xianyu Empire, Nye Tian, Mo Rushi, and Sher arrived at the Holy Light Imperial City half a day later. The 3 of them did not delay. They passed through the outer city and headed for the inner city. After a short time, the 3 of them arrived at the main street of the first inner city. What's going on up ahead? At that moment, a huge square in front of them was crowded with people. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes twinkled as she exclaimed. Nye Tian spread out his godly awareness. He frowned and said in surprise, "It's Duanmu Lu." He sensed a familiar sword intent. It was Duanmu Lu's 8 Extremes sword intent. At that moment, the 8 Extremes sword intent contained a trace of murderous chi. It seemed like Duanmu Lu was fighting with someone. An idea entered Nie Tian's mind, and he hastily walked over. In the square, the crowd was crowded together. In the center were 2 young men. They were both holding sharp swords and staring at each other coldly. One of them was a handsome young man with a black heavy sword in his hand. It was Duanmu Lu. The heavy sword in his hand was the 8 Extremes Kunwu sword. When Nie Tian walked over, the people around him unconsciously made way for him to walk to the innermost area. Duanmu Lu's sword intent has become stronger again. There seems to be a slight change. It seems like he has completely integrated the iron sword inheritance. Nie Tian saw that it was indeed Duanmu Lu. He could not help but smile in relief when he sensed the latter's sword intent. After Duanmu Lu integrated the iron sword inheritance, his strength had advanced to the first tier of the celestial being realm. Although he was not considered a powerhouse, he was definitely not weak. At this moment, his eyes were filled with immense anger as he glared at the yellow-robed youth and bellowed, "Apologize!" Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He knew that Duanmu Lu was a steady person and did not like to look for trouble. He was so angry at that moment. He did not know how the young man in front of him had offended him. At that moment, Nie Tian looked at the young man in yellow and his eyes sank. Chapter 1087. Nie Tian looked at the yellow-clothed youth opposite Duanmu Lu and couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't expect the other party to be so young. He looked to be around 12 years old and his face looked very immature. However, this child's strength was incredible. He was actually at the first level of heaven being. The next moment, Nie Tian moved his divine sense and the surprise in his eyes grew. This child's sword Dao realm was actually sword force. Sword force was not a high realm. Nie Tian was already at the pinnacle of sword soul realm, which was far higher than sword force. However, this child was only 12 years old. To have sword force realm at this age, such talent in sword Dao was amazing. Interesting. Nie Tian looked at the young man and couldn't help but curl up the corner of his mouth. He smiled faintly and was ready to watch a good show. Duanmu Lu was also at sword force realm and his strength was also at the first level of heaven being. He was evenly matched with this youth. It was hard to say who would win. "I won't apologize. What can you do to me? You swordsmen from the lower world are all trash." The yellow-clothed youth looked at Duanmu Lu cold with an insolent and arrogant expression. Hearing the yellow-clothed youth's words, Nie Tian's face darkened and he gradually understood. This yellow-clothed youth must have insulted the swordsman from the lower world, which infuriated Duanmu Lu. That was why the two of them started fighting. Could this child be from the heaven realm? Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. Listening to the yellow-clothed youth's voice, he didn't seem to be from the Shumi world. "Child, you are too arrogant. I will teach you a lesson today." Duanmu Lu's eyes suddenly darkened. He released all the sword intent in his body. A huge sword force bloomed in the air. Immediately, a powerful pressure was released. It was as majestic as a mountain. Duanmu Lu's 8 extreme sword intent was majestic to begin with. With the addition of the iron sword inheritance, its aura became even stronger. "I am a child?" The yellow-clothed youth was very angry. He seemed to hate people calling him a child. He yelled sharply, "You're not much older than me." As soon as he finished speaking, the yellow-robed youth struck out with his sword. The long sword pierced through the air, agile and swift. Countless sword shadows appeared in the air like dancing snakes, whistling as they pressed towards Duanmu Lu. "Blockhead, be careful!" A crisp voice sounded from the side. It was Gu Wuyo. She had a nervous expression on her face and was extremely worried for Duanmu Lu. "Nie Tian, why aren't you stopping them?" Mo Rushi also transmitted her voice to Nie Tian. She was also worried about Duanmu. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured to Imo-rushi not to worry. It's just a spar between kids, there's no need to be so nervous. If Duanmu couldn't even take this sword, then he would be too much of a scumbag. Even Nie Tian would feel embarrassed for him. Arrogant! Duanmu shouted in a deep voice, and the 8 extremities Kunwu streaked across the air. A huge sword momentum was released, but it condensed into a sword intent shield. Bang bang bang! In the next moment, all the sword shadows bombarded the shield, but they collapsed directly. They couldn't penetrate the shield at all. Duanmu was calm by nature. In a situation where he didn't know the strength of his opponent, he chose to fight more conservatively and defensively. Then, the yellow-clothed youth quickly struck with his sword again, but every time, it was perfectly blocked by Duanmu. You idiot! Do you only know how to defend? If you're a real swordsman, then fight me head-on. The yellow-clothed youth was, after all, young, and his repeated attacks were ineffective. He suddenly became angry and roared in a deep voice. Nie Tian also shook his head as he watched from the side. Duanmu was very strong, but his temperament was too calm. Even with the powerful attack power of the 8 extremities sword intent, he still didn't have any aggressive nature. A swordsman must be domineering, ruthless, fast, and decisive. If one were to blindly defend, how could one improve their swordsmanship realm? Duanmu was talented and had strong willpower. His only shortcoming was that he wasn't domineering enough. He was a little calm and dull. Attack. What's the point of always defending? Do you only know how to get beaten? The surrounding crowd was also depressed and shouted in unison. However, Duanmu was like a block of wood, turning a deaf ear to everyone's words as if they didn't exist in his eyes. Brat, I must defeat you with this sword. At this time, the yellow-clothed youth was completely infuriated. His figure leaped high, and a sharp sword intent surged out of his body. A dazzling sword light appeared, which was hundreds of meters long, sharp, and extremely sharp. Oh no, this kid is angry. Imo-rushi's beautiful eyes trembled slightly, and she glanced at Nie Tian, but the latter still looked calm, as if he didn't see anything. Imo-rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, and her gaze seemed to say, "Is there a teacher like you?" Seeing a student being beaten and still standing there like a block of wood. But Nie Tian did not care at all. His gaze was just looking at a black-clothed middle-aged man opposite from time to time. That black-clothed man had been paying attention to the battle on the field all along, his gaze dark, very worried about that yellow-clothed youth. You guys are indeed people from the heaven realm. Nie Tian looked at that black-clothed man and thought to himself. He already sensed that this black-clothed man's strength was at the second-level heavenly emperor. Furthermore, his entire body was surging with a restrained sword intent as if it was going to erupt in an instant. It was just that what made Nie Tian puzzled was that he actually sensed an inexplicable familiarity from this black-clothed man, as if he had seen this person somewhere before. Green Destiny Sword, 1 strike. At this time, the yellow-clothed youth's voice sounded out. His figure moved, wielding the sword with both hands, and slashed down. A terrifying sword aura instantly bloomed out, and the brilliance of the sword circulated in the space. Duanmu, be careful. When Gu Wuyo saw this scene, he cried out once more. But Duanmu did not seem to have heard it. His figure stood there like a huge mountain, not moving at all. Scared silly? When the yellow-clothed youth saw that Duanmu did not move, he could not help smiling very mockingly. Paramount 9 Extremes, Devouring Cloud Absolute Wave. But right at this instant, Duanmu suddenly roared furiously. The sword aura that was suppressed in his entire body was released in an instant. A majestic sword intent surged into the sky, akin to a giant dragon coming out of the abyss. The surging power instantly erupted, directly blasting that sword image in the air until it shattered. Ah! The yellow-clothed youth felt a massive sword aura pressing over. His gaze involuntarily trembled, and he screamed out in shock. "Little junior brother!" Right at this instant, that black-clothed man who had been observing the battle all along cried out in shock. His figure moved instantly, directly appearing in the void. Sword intent was released from his entire body, turning into a shield, helping the yellow-clothed youth to block the powerful blow. Duanmu Lu suddenly felt a surge of sword aura pressing over. His body swayed slightly, unable to withstand it, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. But that sword aura clearly did not want to take his life. Instantly, it froze in midair and did not press down on him. "Duanmu Lu, are you all right?" At this moment, a figure appeared, landing beside Duanmu Lu. It was Nie Tian. "Teacher." Duanmu Lu's complexion was much better now. He had a look of surprise on his face. He did not expect Nie Tian to suddenly appear. Actually, Nie Tian had already seen everything. He was about to make a move, but that black-clothed man suddenly stopped, so he did not make a move. Chapter 1088. Nie Tian looked at the black-clothed man in midair, and his eyes trembled violently. His entire body seemed to have been struck by lightning, and his expression froze. He finally remembered who the man in front of him was. It was none other than the son of his eldest disciple, Han Fei, Han Ling. No wonder Nie Tian felt that Han Ling was inexplicably familiar when he looked at him just now. He remembered that before he died, he had met Han Ling a few times. At that time, the latter was only a child of 6 or 7 years old. He had even hugged the latter and heard him call him Grandmaster. He had never expected that after more than 100 years, the two of them would meet again under such circumstances. "You know me." Han Ling looked at the silver-haired youth in front of him, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He had a stunned expression on his face. He did not know the person in front of him at all. He had no impression of him at all. Moreover, this was the Shumi world, and he had come from the heaven realm. It had only been half a day, so how could someone recognize him? Everything was too strange. Han Ling was stunned, and he could not react for a long time. When he saw Nie Tian, he was still a child of 6 or 7 years old. He basically had no impression of him, and now Nie Tian's appearance had completely changed. How could he recognize him? Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently, and his gaze was surging with passion. He could still see Han Ling again. The excitement in his heart was indescribable. Mo Rushi, Duanmu Lu, and the others were also stunned. They looked at Nie Tian with their mouths agape, completely unable to understand what was going on. "This person is also Nie Tian's disciple?" Mo Rushi said in her heart. Because she already knew that Tang Hao and Li Yi were both Nie Tian's disciples, it was inevitable that she guessed that Han Ling was also Nie Tian's disciple. The crowd was also stunned at this moment, and they looked at him with dumbfounded expressions. "Senior brother, do you know this person?" The yellow-clothed youth was stunned for a moment, and he asked in surprise. "Who are you? Why do you know my name?" In the next moment, Han Ling came to his senses. His eyes shone with a piercing coldness, and the aura around his body surged, releasing a powerful pressure that pressed down on Nie Tian. He had come from the divine realm of the heaven realm to find Li Yi in the holy light region. This was a secret that absolutely could not be known by anyone. However, the silver-haired youth in front of him actually recognized him. This made him involuntarily raise his guard. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly as he broke through Han Ling's pressure. An awkward smile appeared on his face as he said, "I'm not your enemy." At this time, if Nie Tian directly revealed his identity, Han Ling might not believe him. Moreover, it was very likely that he would be even more vigilant. If the two of them were to fight, it would not be good. When Han Ling saw that Nie Tian actually broke through his aura pressure effortlessly, his gaze involuntarily turned intent, and he immediately said in surprise, "You're a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist." Nie Tian was first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. This made Han Ling very surprised. This place was the Sumeru world, How could a heavenly Emperor realm powerhouse possibly appear? What was even more terrifying was that this heavenly Emperor realm martial artist in front of him was still so young, looking only around 20 years old. Han Ling's first reaction was that the silver-haired martial artist was someone from the heaven realm, tailing him here. But after he made a move, the other party just broke through his attack and did not counterattack. Even his eyes were gentle, without any hostility at all. Who in the world are you? Han Ling's figure landed, his gaze fixed on Nye Tian with a scorching gaze, his mind spinning rapidly, but he did not have any impression of Nye Tian at all. Nye Tian was also stunned for a moment. This matter was indeed rather troublesome to explain. It was not something that could be explained clearly in a sentence or two. Where did this lunatic come from, to dare cause trouble in the Holy Light Imperial City? Just as Nye Tian did not know what to say, a furious voice sounded out. Following that, a massive aura descended. A figure landed, directly landing beside Nye Tian. It was precisely Li Yi. Teacher! When Li Yi saw Nye Tian, he could not help but be stunned. The reason why he rushed over was because someone informed him that Duanmu Lu had gotten into a fight with someone, so he rushed over without stopping. Duanmu Lu and the rest had been in the Holy Light Imperial City for a period of time and were already very familiar with Li Yi. 8th Senior Brother. Seeing Li Yi arrive, Duanmu Lu's expression was slightly awkward. He knew that Li Yi had been secretly arranging for people to protect him. Li Yi's appearance here must have been informed by the Dark Guards. Junior brother, are you all right? Li Yi glanced at Duanmu Lu and asked concernedly. Duanmu Lu shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Teacher, what's going on? Only now did Li Yi notice Han Ling and the rest. He swept a cold glance at them, then bowed and asked Nye Tian. And at this moment, Han Ling looked at Li Yi and was actually stunned. His expression stiffened and his lips trembled. Clearly, he was very agitated. When Nye Tian saw Han Ling's expression, he was slightly stunned. Could it be that the latter recognized Li Yi? Your 8th uncle? In the next moment, Han Ling's stiff expression finally eased a little, and he exclaimed in surprise. Li Yi was slightly stunned, then his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he exclaimed, Little Ling! When the crowd saw this reaction of the two and heard Li Yi's exclamation, they were instantly petrified. Nye Tian was also stunned. He did not expect Li Yi and Han Ling to actually recognize each other. You're really Little Ling. Li Yi was stunned for a few seconds, then finally reacted, and once again let out a strange, shrill cry. He had never imagined that Han Ling would actually appear here. Duanmu Lu, the yellow-clothed youth, and the rest all had dazed expressions as they looked at Li Yi and Han Ling dumbfoundedly. This relationship was too messy. Duanmu Lu was Li Yi's junior brother, but Han Ling actually called Li Yi 8th uncle. Looking at it this way, wasn't Duanmu Lu even Han Ling's elder? What was even funnier was that the yellow-clothed youth was Han Ling's junior brother. Therefore, for no reason at all, the yellow-clothed young master became Duanmu Lu's junior. Emo Rushi was even more surprised, looking at Nye Tian in a daze. It seemed like the black-clothed man was not Nye Tian's disciple yet, but his identity was one generation lower than a disciple. What was even stranger was that the black-clothed man's strength was actually second-level Heavenly Emperor. Emo Rushi simply could not imagine what Nye Tian's identity was in his previous life. Why was a random person that popped out so terrifying? At this time, Nye Tian went forward and said, Li Yi, let's return to the manor first. This place was seriously not the place to talk. Yes. Li Yi nodded heavily, respectfully. Han Ling looked at Nye Tian with a look of puzzlement and surprise. He suddenly recalled, it seemed like Li Yi called Nye Tian teacher earlier. Could it be that 8th uncle acknowledged a new teacher again? Han Ling had a stunned expression, looking at Nye Tian with a suspicious look, saying in his heart, even if 8th uncle wants to acknowledge a teacher, he also shouldn't acknowledge a child as his teacher, right? Under the strange gazes of the crowd, Nie Tian and the rest left in a grandiose manner. After a moment, everyone entered the Li Manor. In the Li Manor's main hall, 3 figures sat there. They were precisely Nie Tian, Li Yi, and Han Ling. Han Ling looked at Nie Tian, who sat on the main hall's main seat, and simply could not hold back anymore. He stood up and asked, "Eighth uncle, this Mr. is?" Since Li Yi was so respectful toward Nie Tian, no matter how strange it was in his heart, he also had to maintain respect. Li Yi's gaze looked at Nie Tian. The latter nodded his head. Only then did he say, "Little Ling, he's your grandmaster." Chapter 1089. In the main hall, Han Ling looked at Nie Tian. After a full 10 seconds, his stiff face finally showed some expression, but it was still a look of disbelief. Suddenly, he looked at Li Yi, as if to confirm that this was not a joke. "He is my teacher, your grandmaster, the former #1 war god of the heaven realm, Nie Tian." Li Yi nodded heavily, giving Han Ling the most certain answer. Han Ling was still stunned, and he stared hard at Nie Tian, as if looking for a trace of evidence. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "When you came to the War God Temple when you were young, you secretly ate a 9th-grade spirit pill, and I used my sword intent to help you dissolve the powerful medicinal power of the spirit pill." Hearing Nie Tian's words, Han Ling was stunned, and then his eyes suddenly widened. He remembered this very clearly. Only he and Nie Tian knew, not even his father Han Fei. Grandmaster! Finally, Han Ling reacted, and believed that the person in front of him was Nie Tian, and he knelt on the ground, extremely excited. Nie Tian took a step forward, helped him up, and said with a smile, "I'm really happy to see that you're fine." Facing 100 pairs of grand disciples, Nie Tian was really not used to it. After a while, the 3 of them calmed down. Han Ling told him everything that had happened. It turned out that he was saved by the limitless sword saint, Mo Qianjun, and then Mo Qianjun kept him by his side and accepted him as a disciple. At that time, Li Yi was also saved by Mo Qianjun, but Mo Qianjun later sent Li Yi to the Sumer world. When Li Yi left, Han Ling was already 14 or 15 years old, so he remembered Li Yi's appearance and recognized him at a glance. "You're Mo Qianjun's disciple?" Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He didn't expect this, and then he laughed and said, "Don't call me Grandmaster in the future, call me Mr. or Lord." Since Han Ling was already Mo Qianjun's disciple, if he still called Nie Tian Grandmaster, it would be taking advantage of Mo Qianjun. Han Ling thought for a moment. Of course, he understood Nie Tian's meaning and nodded slightly. "Han Ling, since you are Brother Mo's disciple, is the yellow-robed young master who came with you also a disciple of Brother Mo?" Nie Tian suddenly remembered that Han Ling had addressed the yellow-robed young man as junior brother, and couldn't help but ask. "Yes, his name is Pu Fifan, teacher's last disciple." Han Ling nodded and said, "Little junior brother's talent in sword Dao is very high, and he's master's favorite disciple. However, he was too young and arrogant. This time, he followed me to the Sumer world because master wants to sharpen his spirit." Nie Tian nodded approvingly and said, "To have the strength of the first level of Heaven Being realm at the age of 12 and the sword momentum realm, this talent is indeed very high." Mo Qianjun had accepted a good disciple. But at such a young age, it's a good thing to have drive. There's no need to polish it. If Nie Tian was Pu Fifan's teacher, he definitely wouldn't polish the latter's drive too early. He would let him be arrogant for a few years first, and it would be best to sharpen one's temperament after the age of 15. However, Mo Qianjun was a steady person, and his method of teaching was different. Hence, he would polish Pu Fifan's temperament in advance. If it were Jiu Qianxing, he would be an impatient person. Not only would he not polish Pu Fifan, but he would also encourage the latter to be as arrogant as possible. Nie Tian, Mo Qianjun, and Jiu Qianxing were all experts at the pinnacle of sword Dao, but their personalities were different. Hence, their methods of teaching were also different. There was no good or bad among them, and the most important thing was whether they were suitable or not. Since Pu Fifan was Emo Qianjuan's disciple, Nie Tian naturally wouldn't ask too much. The young man with the heavy sword just now was also not bad. If he was in the heaven realm, he would definitely be much stronger than junior brother Pu. Han Ling nodded and said, obviously referring to Duanmu Lu. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't say much. Pu Fifan's talent in sword Dao was very high, but Duanmu Lu wasn't bad either. It was just that because he was born in the 3,000 small worlds, his current strength was relatively weaker. If Duanmu Lu was born in the heaven realm's god domain, his current strength would most likely be in the heavenly emperor realm. His sword Dao realm would definitely not just be sword force. Han Ling, did Lord Emo ask you to come here all of a sudden? At this moment Li Yi suddenly asked. In the heaven realm, Emo Qianjun was the only person who knew that Li Yi was in the Shumi world's holy light region. Han Ling reacted and couldn't help but cry out. He immediately took out a letter and passed it to Li Yi, saying, "It was teacher who asked me to look for you. He asked me to pass this letter to you." Li Yi took the letter and directly opened it. After reading it, he passed it to Nie Tian. After the latter read the letter, he couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth into a bitter smile. "Mr. Nie, what did teacher say?" Han Ling couldn't help but ask when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. Nie Tian passed the letter to Han Ling, but he muttered to himself, "It seems that the news that I'm still alive has already spread. Everyone who should know already knows." Emo Qianjuan's letter was written to Li Yi. In his heart, he said that he already knew that Nie Tian wasn't dead and was in the Shumi world. He told Li Yi to find Nie Tian no matter what. Since Emo Qianjun knew that Nie Tian wasn't dead, then the others definitely knew as well. Although Nie Tian didn't know the identity of the Heaven Realm assassins that appeared previously, he was basically sure that they were definitely sent by Luo Chenhan. Emo Qianjun also said in the letter that if he found Nie Tian, he should not return to the Heaven Realm's god domain for the time being, because Luo Chenhan was already prepared to target him. It's that Luo Chenhan again. How does he know that Mr. Nie is still alive? After reading the letter, Han Ling couldn't help but look gloomy, his eyes releasing terrifying anger. His father, Han Fei, was still imprisoned by Luo Chenhan in the Sky's Edge Purgatory, and he hated Luo Chenhan to the bone. But he was too weak, and couldn't save Han Fei at all. "Teacher, what do you want to do?" Li Yi paused for a moment, and looked at Nie Tian. "What else can I do?" Nie Tian smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth raised into a cold smile, and said, "Since Luo Chenhan has already spread out his net and is waiting for me, if I don't go, wouldn't it be a waste of his painstaking efforts? Heaven Realm's god domain, I must return, and I will return immediately." Luo Chenhuan's methods were cruel and vicious, but Nie Tian wasn't the kind of person who was afraid of death. He still hadn't gotten his revenge, and if he was scared off by Luo Chenhuan's stance, how could he get his revenge? Li Yi nodded heavily. He already knew that Nie Tian would definitely not go to the Heaven Realm's god domain just because of Emo Qianjuan's reminder. This was not in line with Nie Tian's character. "Han Ling, don't worry. I will definitely save your father." Nie Tian looked at Han Ling and said solemnly. Han Ling nodded heavily, suppressing his huge anger. Every day, when he thought of his father suffering in the Sky's Edge Purgatory, that kind of heartache was unbearable. He once asked Emo Qianjun why the latter didn't save Han Fei when he clearly had the ability. Emo Qianjun solemnly told him that the matter with Nie Tian back then wasn't as simple as it seemed. "That's right, eighth uncle." At this time, Han Ling suddenly thought of something, and a scarlet token appeared in his hand. He handed it to Li Yi and said, "Teacher asked me to give this token to you, saying that you will understand after seeing it." Chapter 1090. In the hall, Nie Tian and Li Yi exclaimed at the same time when they saw the crimson token in Han Ling's hand. "You recognize this token?" Han Ling was taken aback when he saw their reactions. This is the Crimson Flame token of the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace. Nie Tian said in a deep voice, his brows knitted tightly. He couldn't understand why Mo Qianjun would have the Crimson Flame token, and why he gave it to Li Yi. The Crimson Flame Demonic Palace was a demon force in the Heaven Realm. They had invaded the Day-Night Realm a long time ago, but were repelled by Nie Tian. The master of the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace, Lu Demonic II, was also seriously injured by Nie Tian. Since then, the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace disappeared, and Lu Demonic II also disappeared. 1 month after the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace invaded, Luo Chenhun betrothed Luo Xian to Nie Tian. Another month later, the two were married, and on the wedding night, Nie Tian died tragically in Luo Xian's hands. Only at the moment of his death did Nie Tian realize that during the past 2 months, Luo Xian had planted one of the 3 great evil curses, the soul-binding terror curse, on him by taking the opportunity to get close to him. On the wedding night, the soul-binding terror curse on Nie Tian's body broke out, and he resisted incomparably. In the end, he was killed by Luo Xian. It was also at that moment that Nie Tian completely understood that Luo Chenhun betrothed Luo Xian to him, and Luo Xian getting close to him, was a bloody plot from the beginning. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's expression changed. After a long time, he calmed down. He looked at Li Yi and said, Li Yi, do you know why Mo Qianjun gave you the Crimson Flame token? Li Yi shook his head, then handed the Crimson Flame token to Nie Tian and said, Teacher, I feel that Lord Mo Qianjun's Crimson Flame token isn't for me, but for you. For me? Nie Tian took the Crimson Flame token and was slightly stunned, then immediately understood. Mo Qianjun knew that Li Yi would definitely find Nie Tian, so he wanted to hand the Crimson Flame token to Nie Tian through Li Yi. However, Nie Tian couldn't understand why Mo Qianjun gave him the Crimson Flame token. Could not understand why Mo Qianjun gave him the Crimson Flame token. Could it be that there was some secret behind the Crimson Flame token? Nie Tian, he said. Tian, Nie Tian, Nie Tian, you know who? Nie Tian, yi Mo, don vi de. Nie Tian, even if you kill me you won't live. Long time, Ling Tian flame ling and yi Tian, time, in time, I hu mo flame, one hand. When Nie Tian fought with the Crimson Flame Devil Palace's master, the Luo Mo II, the latter said. At that time, Nie Tian didn't care, thinking that the Luo Mo II wanted to sow discord between him and Luo Chenhun. But now that he thought about it, it seemed that the Luo Mo II knew some secret. The Luo Mo II said that I don't know who I am. What does that mean? Nie Tian was puzzled, and the expression on his face was tangled. Speaking of which, Nie Tian really didn't know his background. He was an orphan and grew up with an old man. The old man died when he was 5 years old. He only remembered that the old man called him young master, and he had no impression of anything else. Later, he went through the trials and tribulations on his own, all the way until he became the Heaven Realm War God, the pinnacle of Sword Dao. Along the way, only Nie Tian knew the hardships he had experienced. Because of this, he cherished everything he had, but in the end, he died inexplicably at the hands of Luo Chenhun and his daughter. It was really unacceptable. Nie Tian had thought of investigating his own identity, but unfortunately, before he could even start, he fell. In this life, he had been reborn, so he must investigate his own identity. No matter what, he must give himself an explanation. Thinking of these things, Nie Tian gradually understood. Mo Qianjun gave him the Scarlet Flame token, as if hinting that if he wanted to find out what happened in the past, he must go to the Crimson Flame Devil Palace. Nie Tian also felt that the Luo Mo II must know some secret. Mo Qianjun must have known something, so he used the Scarlet Flame token to remind Nie Tian. Thinking of this, Nie Tian frowned even more. He faintly felt that his death in his previous life was a shocking conspiracy, and perhaps it was far more complicated than he thought. The Crimson Flame Devil Palace is obviously an organization that appeared in the East River Divine Realm, and the Old Man of Heaven Wasteland is also in the East River Divine Realm, so I will go there first. Nye Tian put away the Scarlet Flame token and made a decision in his heart. At this time, he looked at Han Ling and said, "When are you going back to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm?" Han Ling's eyes flickered and said, "Teacher told me to return immediately after handing the letter and token to 8th Uncle, and that we must not stay. He also told us not to return to the Limitless Mountain directly, but to go back after training for a while." Nye Tian smiled. Of course he understood Mo Qianjuan's meaning. The latter was afraid that someone would find out that Han Ling and the others had come to the Sumer world. Mo Qianjuan's style of doing things could be described in one word: calm. "All right, you can go back now." Nye Tian did not let Han Ling delay, and immediately asked them to return to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. "Mister, aren't you coming with us?" Han Ling knew that Nye Tian was also going to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, and the latter obviously did not have a high-grade spacetime scroll, so he thought that the latter would go with them, but now Nye Tian did not have the intention to go with them. "I will enter the Heaven Realm from another place." Nye Tian smiled faintly, and then walked out of the hall. After a while, they arrived at an empty space. Han Ling took out the spacetime scroll, and the space shook, and a large formation was formed. Nye Tian sensed that it was a rank 8 spacetime spirit formation, and it was enough to break the space barrier between the Sumer world and the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. Han Ling and Pu Fifan stepped into the spirit formation. "Duanmu, I will wait for you in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. The next time we fight, the one who will win will definitely be me." Pu Fifan looked at Duanmu with burning eyes, and it was obvious that he was still brooding over his previous defeat, and said confidently, "That might not be the case." Duanmu replied faintly, and he seemed to have become friends with Pu Fifan. "Lord Nye Tian, 8th Uncle, everyone, we are leaving." Han Ling stood in front of the spirit formation, and said goodbye to everyone. Then, the space-time spirit formation released a dazzling white light, and directly tore the space apart. After the dazzling white light disappeared, Han Ling and Pu Fifan's figures also disappeared. It was the first time for many people to see such a scene, and their faces were filled with shock. The warriors of the Heaven Realm were indeed very terrifying. Nye Tian looked up into the sky and muttered with a smile. His eyes were filled with blazing desire. "Luo Chenhun, just you wait, I will go to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm very soon. This time, I want to get to the bottom of everything," Nye Tian muttered in his heart, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Nye Tian returned to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, not only to take revenge for his previous life, but also to get to the bottom of what happened in the past. Chapter 1091. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. During this half a month, Nye Tian stayed in Holy Light Imperial City. Apart from cultivating, he accompanied Mo Rushi, Cher, Nye Yuro, and the others. This period of time could be considered the most leisurely since his rebirth. At this time, Nye Tian stood outside the Li residence, with Mo Rushi and Cher by his side. "Big brother Nye Tian, big sister Rushi, big sister Cher, you must come back soon. I will miss you." Nye Yuro's eyes were filled with tears, she was very sad. Nye Tian also wanted to bring more people with him to the Heaven Realm, but his strength was too weak, and he was unable to protect so many people. In the end, he let Mo Rushi and Cher go with him. Under everyone's gaze, the figures of the three gradually disappeared. Half a month later, Nye Tian returned to Geelong City, but he did not stay here. One day later, he arrived at the space-time barrier of Geelong region. "Lord Nye Tian, this is the space-time barrier that leads to the Heaven Realm God domain." Tian Liang pointed at the void in front. The state of the space there was clearly different from the surroundings, it was the place where planes intersected. Nye Tian no longer hesitated. After taking one last look at Chen Jini, he stepped into the space-time barrier. As soon as they stepped into the barrier, Nye Tian felt an immense pressure bearing down on him, almost suffocating him. He immediately unleashed his Deva domain to envelop Mo Rushi and Shui. This was a barrier formed by the intersection of a middle-level plane and a high-level plane. The spatial pressure was so great that it could crush martial artists below the 9th level of the Heaven Realm to death. Therefore, to enter the Heaven Realm God domain through this barrier, one had to be at least at the Heavenly Emperor Realm. Fortunately, Nye Tian was far stronger than the average Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artist, so he could not only ensure his own safety, but also protect Mo Rushi and Cher at the same time. In the next moment, the space released a dazzling white light. A vast pressure came head-on, almost tearing Nye Tian's body apart. Nye Tian endured the pain, and after a few seconds, the tearing feeling suddenly disappeared. When the three of them opened their eyes again, the scene before them had completely changed. At this time, Nye Tian's face was flushed red and his chest felt stuffy. His body shook slightly and he spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. His complexion improved a lot. Nye Tian, are you alright? Mo Rushi and Cher were very nervous when they saw that Nye Tian was injured and asked in unison. Nye Tian smiled bitterly and waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. The space-time pressure was too great. Even someone as powerful as Nye Tian's martial body was still suppressed to the point that his blood energy was churning. Nye Tian let out a long breath and began to observe the illusion around him. They seemed to have come to a barren land. The surroundings were desolate, and there were only very short shrubs on the ground. Occasionally, strange black birds would fly over their heads. It was very strange. Nye Tian gazed off into the distance and saw a broad road. Let's go there and take a look. The Heaven Realm Divine Realm's Heaven-Earth spiritual energy was dozens of times richer than the Sumer world, hundreds or even thousands of times richer than the 3,000 small world. Cultivating here for a day was almost equivalent to cultivating in the 3,000 small worlds for several months or even a year. Because a martial artist's martial body could absorb Heaven-Earth spiritual energy to a limit, it was affected by various factors. So even if the Heaven-Earth spiritual energy was rich to the point of liquefaction, a martial artist's strength could not improve at a rapid rate unless they had a special encounter and absorbed some powerful energy. Nye Tian was also not sure where he was now because the Heaven Realm Divine Realm was too big. Even he had not walked around the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. The center of the Heaven Realm Divine Realm was divided into 5 regions: Daynite Divine Realm, East River Divine Realm, North Sea Divine Realm, West Divine Realm, and Sealed Snow Divine Realm. In his previous life, Nye Tian was in the Daynite Divine Realm, but he occasionally went to the other 4 Divine Realms. Of course, he had also been to places outside the 5 major Divine Realms. After a while, the 3 of them came to a wide road. This is an official road, but I don't know where it leads to. Let's wait for a while, Nye Tian murmured, then looked into the distance. At this moment, a gigantic shadow appeared in the sky as far as he could see. It's the steelback dragon eagle. Nye Tian looked at the shadow in the sky, the corner of his mouth curled up into a smile, and he shouted the name of the giant bird. The steelback dragon eagle was a rank 7 spirit beast, a very common mount in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, just like the 4-winged griffins in the 3,000 small world. Boom! Nye Tian's body shook slightly, and a sword intent was released, soaring into the sky, and a 1,000-meter-long sword light shot out. He wanted to attract the attention of the person above the steelback dragon eagle. A whoa! As expected, the steelback dragon eagle let out a mournful cry, then flew towards Nye Tian and the others. Let's get on the steelback dragon eagle first, then we'll figure out what this place is. Nye Tian said to Mo Rushi and Cher with a faint smile. The 2 girls nodded. This was their first time in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, so of course they would listen to Nye Tian. The Heaven Realm Divine Realm was too big. If they were to wander around aimlessly, Nie Tian and the others might not be able to find their way for a few days. Soon, the steelback dragon eagle descended and landed about 100 meters away from Nie Tian and the others. Mo Rushi and Cher stared at the giant black bird in front of them in amazement. It was simply a huge creature, at least 500 to 600 meters long, and with its wings spread out, it could reach a length of 1,000 meters. There were many people standing on the steelback dragon eagle, all dressed in the same outfit. Beside them, there were many big boxes with the support of spiritual arrays, seemingly containing something valuable. Nie Tian took a look and immediately understood. This steelback dragon eagle was raised by a certain merchant group, and was specially used to transport goods. "Who are you people?" At this time, a gray-robed old man stood up. His aura was not weak, actually at the 9th level of the heaven realm. He spoke in a deep voice, appearing very cautious. "Old mister, we are martial artists from the Sumeru realm. This is our first time in the heaven realm divine realm, and we would like to hitch a ride. You just need to take us to a nearby city." Nie Tian was very sincere, directly telling the truth. With a glance, he knew that this gray-robed old man was the kind of person who had seen countless people. If he lied in front of the latter, it was very likely that he would be exposed, and it would not be good for him. At this time, the martial artists behind the old man walked up one after another, their greedy eyes wandering between Mo Rushi and Cher. "These two girls are so beautiful! Yeah, look at their little cheeks, a gentle touch can squeeze water out of them. If these girls are willing to accompany me for a night, I am willing to live 100 years less." Hearing these people's filthy words, Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed, and a sharp cold light flashed in his eyes. Martial artists from the Sumeru realm? Almost at the same time, the gray-robed old man's eyes suddenly darkened, and his divine sense swept over Nie Tian and the others. Suddenly, his brows furrowed and he roared, "You're lying!" Boom! The next moment, the martial artists on the steelback dragon eagle suddenly became vigilant and released their aura, connecting into one, pressing down like a mountain. Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently. He did not want to make a move, but it seemed that it was impossible. Chapter 1092. Just as Nie Tian was about to make a move, a white-clothed figure appeared and shouted delicately, making those martial artists all stop. "Miss Ju!" All the martial artists were suddenly taken aback, then immediately called out respectfully, lowering their heads, not daring to look at that white-clothed figure. Nie Tian's gaze turned intense slightly, looking at that white-clothed woman. The latter carried a long sword on her back, the aura around her retracted, but there was a strange sword intent surging non-stop, very strange. First level Heavenly Emperor strength, sword soul realm. In an instant, Nie Tian sensed the white-clothed woman's strength, and his gaze involuntarily turned intent, considerably shocked. This white-clothed woman looked only 25 or 26 years old, but her strength was actually so high, astonishing. There were not many female swordsmen in the first place. Those able to reach the level of this woman in front of him were even less than 1 in a million. "Miss Ju." When that gray-clothed old man saw the white-clothed woman appear, he immediately retreated to one side, bowed and lowered his head, being respectful. "Your Sumeru world martial artists?" The white-clothed woman's beautiful eyes flickered, the corners of her mouth curling up into a strange smile, as she asked coolly. Nie Tian nodded slightly, but he was much more cautious in his heart. Although this woman's looks were devastatingly beautiful, her eyes carried a sinister aura. Especially that sword intent on her body, it was very strange. "Miss Ju, this silver-haired boy is lying. How can Sumeru world martial artists possibly have Heavenly Emperor realm strength?" The gray-clothed old man took a step forward and said solemnly, "This young lady feels that he's not lying." Miss Ju smiled charmingly and said, "More than a month ago, wasn't there also a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist from Sumeru world? Miss Ju, this boy looks like his talent is ordinary. How can he be mentioned in the same breath as Lord Lin-Yi? That grey-clothed old man smiled sinisterly, glaring at Nye Tian with a vicious gaze. Lin-Yi. When Nye Tian heard this name, his gaze could not help trembling. Very clearly, the Lin-Yi that this grey-clothed old man spoke of was the Lin-Yi who entered the Heaven Realm's divine realm more than a month ago. Lin-Yi and Nye Tian entered the Heaven Realm's god domain first, so Lin-Yi didn't know Nye Tian's current strength. But just as the old man finished speaking, a crisp slap rang out. Half of the old man's face immediately swelled up. Idiot! Do you think you can say Lin-Yi's name like that? Miss Ju scolded. She was the one who had slapped him. The old man was slapped in the face, but he didn't dare to be angry. Instead, he slapped himself and said, "It's a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue, all right." Miss Ju shot a cold glance at the grey-robed old man and berated him. Then, she turned to Nye Tian and said with a smile, "My servant is too stupid. I've made a fool of myself in front of you." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He thought for a moment and said, "Miss Ju, can we come up?" Originally, Nye Tian felt that this Miss Ju was a bit strange, so he didn't want to get on the iron-backed dragon eagle. However, the grey-robed old man had mentioned Lin-Yi, so he couldn't help but be curious about Lin-Yi. "You're welcome. Just call me Julian." Julian smiled sweetly and let Nye Tian come up. "May I know your name?" Nye Tian. Nye Tian didn't even bother to hide his name. Then, he asked Emo Rushi and Shui to go up first before he went up. "Nice name." Julian laughed. She seemed very enthusiastic. "Miss Ju, you don't need to worry about us. Just bring us to the nearest city." Nye Tian said to Julian, then found an empty place for Emo Rushi and Cher to sit down. Julian nodded and smiled. She didn't disturb Nye Tian anymore. Instead, she walked to a small house on the back of the iron-backed dragon eagle. The back of the iron-backed dragon eagle was hundreds of meters long and wide. It was enough to build a mansion. Cough, cough. At this time, 2 coughs came from inside that house. It was very light. Hearing the voice, it should be a 13 or 14 years old girl. Nye Tian did not mind either. He stuck close to Cher and sat down. Following that, the iron-backed dragon eagle flew up, galloping for 10,000 miles, charging straight for the clouds. After Nye Tian felt a jolt, he settled down after a moment. At this time, Nye Tian shut his eyes slightly, but his divine sense secretly spread out. He wanted to see what kind of strength these people had. Very soon, Nye Tian opened his eyes again, but his expression was somewhat surprised. These martial artists around him, their strengths were not too high. They were merely just 7th or 8th level Deva being. But at the very back of the iron-backed dragon eagle, there were 3 finely dressed youths, all 1st level heavenly emperor strength, their auras powerful. Apart from this, there was also a 2nd level heavenly emperor strength green-robed old man beside these 3 finely dressed youths. It seemed like these 4 people were together, separated from Julian and the rest. After a moment, the iron-backed dragon eagle completely calmed down. The surrounding martial artists started to become restless. Greedy gazes swept past Emo Rushi and Cher from time to time. Furthermore, they lowered their heads and whispered to each other, occasionally bursting into laughter. Nye Tian naturally knew what these people were talking about. But he did not want to cause unnecessary trouble, so he pretended not to hear. However, right at this moment, a figure walked over and stood beside Nye Tian and the others. A pair of dead fish eyes stared straight at Shui. "What do you want to do?" Emo Rushi was even angrier than Nye Tian. She stood up abruptly, anger flickering in her beautiful eyes, akin to 2 balls of flames. Interacting with Cher for such a long time, Emo Rushi had long regarded the former as her younger sister. How could she allow others to use this kind of gaze to look at Cher? Nye Tian also stood together at this time, indicating for Emo Rushi to calm down. Then, he looked at that person coldly and said solemnly, "Don't provoke me. The person standing in front of Nye Tian and the rest was precisely one of those 3 finely dressed youths with first-level heavenly emperor strength. That finely dressed youth swept a glance over Nye Tian with sinister eyes, his eyes revealing extreme disdain, and said, "A trash that came from the spatial world also dares to speak to this young master like this?" He already heard the conversation between Nye Tian and Julien and the rest earlier and knew that Nye Tian and the rest came from the spatial world. The heavenly realms, divine realms people had always looked down on the people of the spatial world. This was the same logic as the people of the spatial world looking down on the people of the trichiliocosm. "I'll say it one more time, don't provoke me." Nye Tian's gaze turned intent, his eyes suddenly turning cold. A terrifying, killing intent surged around him, about to erupt in an instant. "Silver-haired brat, your temper is very bad. Want us brothers to help you vent your anger?" At this time, the other 2 finely dressed youths also walked over, their eyes flickering with full contempt, not taking Nye Tian seriously at all. Even if Nye Tian was first-level heavenly emperor strength, this also could not change the fact that he was a spatial world martial artist. In their eyes, no matter how strong the spatial world's martial artists were, they also could not contend with the heavenly realm's divine realm's martial artists. "I won't provoke you, I'll provoke her." The first finely dressed youth who appeared swept a cold glance over Nye Tian and suddenly said, and actually directly extended his lecherous hand towards Cher. Chapter 1093. The finely dressed youth's eyes flickered with an undisguised lascivious light and actually suddenly reached his hand out toward Cher. Seeing this scene, Nye Tian's entire body's aura suddenly erupted. The monstrous rage turned into piercingly cold, killing intent. In an instant, terrifying killing intent spread out, filling the space within several thousand meters. Everyone felt the bone-chilling killing intent, immediately akin to falling into an ice cellar. It was as if the essence meridians within their bodies were frozen by the killing intent. Everyone's gazes trembled violently, their eyes when looking at Nye Tian were filled with terror. It was just that in an instant, that originally calm silver-haired youth became a sharp sword that killed. A whoa! The iron-backed dragon eagle sensed the terrifying killing intent. Its massive body suddenly trembled. Following that, it let out a shrill wail, reverberating throughout the horizon. "Be careful!" The next instant, the 2 people behind that finely dressed youth detected the piercing killing intent and cried out at the same time, their faces horrified to the extreme. However, that person who reached his hand out seemed to be standing on the spot in a daze, and actually did not move at all, his eyes lifeless, expression stiff. It turned out that in that instant just now, not only did Nye Tian erupt with an oppressive aura, he even used the eye of the starry sky's absolute tremor. He was only several meters away from that finely dressed youth. Such a close distance, the mental deterrence of absolute tremor was unimaginably terrifying. Even if Nye Tian did not make a move at this moment, the finely dressed youth also needed over a dozen seconds before he could react. But would he not make a move? Of course not. Pooh work. Under countless gazes, a streak of murderous sword light flashed past, the sound of flesh being torn apart sounded out. Amidst a stretch of glaring bloodlight, that finely dressed youth's head fell to the ground. The bloody head rolled down. Everyone's gazes became utterly lifeless. The atmosphere on the entire iron-backed dragon eagle was deathly still, the air oppressive until it made people feel suffocated. No one could have thought that the battle was actually so direct and straightforward. Nye Tian and the finely dressed youth were both first-level heavenly emperor strength. But the latter was like a child in front of the former, completely without any ability to retaliate. Furthermore, Nye Tian was also vicious enough, actually killing the other party with the most bloody decapitation method. This kind of scene could awe the others even more. Hiss! After more than 10 seconds, everyone gasped. The shock in their eyes had yet to dissipate. Everyone was extremely puzzled. Why was the well-dressed young man motionless in front of Nye Tian? It was as if he had been completely controlled and had become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Nye Tian's entire body was filled with killing intent. His cold gaze swept through the crowd, and everyone who met his gaze felt a chill run down their spines. Some people couldn't help but tremble. Who else dares to look at the lady by my side? This is the best example, Nye Tianling said coldly. A huge, spiritual deterrence rippled out like an invisible wave. Everyone felt their souls tremble, and they lowered their heads, not daring to take another look. Old Third. It was only at this moment that the other two young men in luxurious clothes reacted to the situation. They howled, and then killing intent surged from their bodies. Their malicious gazes locked onto Nye Tian, as if they wanted to skin him alive. Nye Tianling swept a cold glance over those two people. If the other party dared to make a move, he did not mind killing two more people. These Heaven Realm's divine realm martial artists thought that they had some strength, and they were unbelievably insolent, looking down on the people of the spatial world. Little did they know that they were merely a little lucky, being born in the Heaven Realm's divine realm, that was all. Stop! Right at this time, an aged voice sounded out. A figure walked over. It was precisely that old man in azure clothes who had been staying together with the three young men in luxurious clothes all along. Elder Wang. When the two young men in luxurious clothes saw the old man in azure clothes appear, they immediately bowed and shouted, their expressions respectful. Nye Tian glanced at the old man in azure clothes in front of him. The latter's strength was second-level Heavenly Emperor, one level higher than him. But he was not afraid in the slightest. If this old man did not know what was good for him, he did not mind killing another person. A mere second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist, Nye Tian did not take him seriously in the slightest. Spiritual attack. Impressive. The old man in azure clothes sized up Nye Tian with a pair of cold eyes, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. Apart from viciousness in his gaze, there was also unconcealable fear. Spiritual attack. Hearing the old man in azure clothes' words, everyone's gazes trembled fiercely, immediately understanding why when Nye Tian made a move just now, that young man in luxurious clothes did not react at all like a fool. It turned out that he was hit by Nye Tian's spiritual attack. At this moment, everyone's eyes when looking at Nye Tian became even more horrified. Martial artists able to use spiritual attacks were not many to begin with, but Nye Tian's spiritual attack earlier completely did not have any signs, instantly controlling a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist. This was too bizarre. Only all the way until this time did these people understand that it turned out that this silver-haired martial artist from the spatial realm in front of them was actually so terrifying. Brat, do you know who we are? Suddenly, the old man in azure clothes released a cold light in his eyes, the threatening intent not concealed at all. Do you think that I'll care? Nye Tian shot the old man in azure clothes a glance and replied coldly. He just came to the Heaven Realm Divine Domain. How would he know who this old man was? The other party was also not the Heaven Realm 9 Emperors or a big shot at the pinnacle of Sword Dao. Brat, I is the Lone Eagle Fort's third elder, Wang Changfeng. Wang Changfeng was thoroughly infuriated by Nye Tian. He shouted coldly, his eyes flickering with cold intent. When Wang Changfeng's words fell, it immediately caused everyone to discuss animatedly. They're from the Lone Eagle Fort. No wonder they're so arrogant. Yeah, the Lone Eagle Fort is a third-rate faction in the East River Divine Domain. The entire Lone Eagle Ridge is the Lone Eagle Fort's sphere of influence. This old man is actually the Lone Eagle Fort's third elder. No wonder eldest miss didn't let us provoke them. Everyone's exclamations of astonishment made Wang Changfeng even more pleased with himself, the disdain in his eyes intensified. But Nye Tian shook his head slightly, looking at Wang Changfeng like he was looking at an idiot. This guy was at least 300 to 400 years old. His age was already like a dog's body. A mere third-rate faction in the East River Divine Domain also dared to be so arrogant. In that case, we're currently in the East River Divine Domain. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his face actually revealing delight. His luck was pretty good, directly arriving at the East River Divine Domain. And Wang Chongfeng was stunned. Only now did he realize that the other party did not take him seriously at all, completely ignoring his existence. But he was still considered somewhat rational, and did not directly make a move. The method that Nye Tian used to kill the finely dressed youth earlier was too bizarre, making him apprehensive. Wang Chongfeng's gaze looked into the distance. On the ground, a majestic ancient city appeared. Ahead is Lonesome City. That place is our Lone Eagle Fort's territory. As long as we let this brat enter Lonesome City, he's dead for sure. The corners of Wang Chongfeng's mouth curled up into a hint of a cold smile as he said viciously in his heart. He was not in a hurry to make a move because he did not know just what Nye Tian's strength was like. Faintly, he sensed that Nye Tian was not simple, so he absolutely could not be careless. Might as well wait until they reached Lonesome City. At that time, he would have more assurance in making a move. Brat, we'll wait and see. Wang Chongfeng gave a cold laugh and actually turned around to leave. The crowd's gaze trembled, their faces dumbfounded. As the Lone Eagle Fort's third elder, Wang Chongfeng was actually afraid and did not dare to make a move against Nye Tian. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He indicated for Mo Rushi and Cher to sit down, and he also sat down. Chapter 1094. On the iron-backed dragon hawk, Nye Tian and Mo Rushi and Cher were sitting together. At this time, no one dared to look around casually. The scene of Nye Tian killing the Lone Eagle Castle's people was still echoing in their minds. Nye Tian even dared to kill the Lone Eagle Castle's people. How could he be lenient towards others? Nye Tian sat there, his face expressionless, but his heart was very clear. When the Lone Eagle Castle's people were provoking him, Zhu Lian had been watching from the side. Obviously, she was using the Lone Eagle Castle's people to test Nye Tian's strength. Nye Tian guessed that the Lone Eagle Castle's people were the same as him, hitching a ride. Zhu Lian was the master of this iron-backed dragonhawk. Cough, cough. At this time, 2 dry coughs came from the small house. Nye Tian frowned slightly. It seemed that the girl who coughed had a serious illness. That weak aura gave Nye Tian a familiar feeling. Suddenly, Nye Tian looked at the huge box in front of him. Strangely, he couldn't see what was inside with his starry sky eyes. The box was surrounded by a high-grade spiritual shielding array. Nye Tian's divine sense couldn't penetrate it directly. If he forcibly used the holographic divine rune, he could sense what was inside the box, but there was a possibility that others might discover it. He didn't want to take this risk, so he didn't force it. After a while, the iron-backed dragonhawk arrived above a majestic ancient city. Everyone could see the whole city. Looking down from this angle, the structure of the entire city could be seen at a glance. We've arrived at Lonely Little City. Wang Chongfeng looked at the ancient city under his feet. His heart trembled, and a poisonous light flashed in his eyes. He couldn't help but look at Nye Tian. Elder Wang, are you going to go down here? Zhu Lian's voice sounded from the small house. Miss Zhu will go down here. However, Wang Chongfeng's tone was very respectful, but he suddenly raised his voice and looked at Nye Tian. Someone also said that he wanted to go to the nearest city. Now that we've arrived at Lonely Little City, shouldn't we go down? The enigmatic voice was obviously referring to Nye Tian and the others. At this time, Zhu Lian walked out, her white robes fluttering in the wind. She looked at Nye Tian and smiled. Young Master Nye Tian, are you going to stay in Little Goose City as well? Of course. Nye Tian stood up and smiled. How could he not see that Wang Chongfeng and Zhu Lian were working together to force him into Little Lonely City? He had already guessed that Lonely City was the territory of the Lone Eagle Fort. Wang Chongfeng had forced Nie Tian to go to Lonely City because he wanted to kill him in the city. Zhu Lian smiled lightly and signaled to the other person. The ironback dragonhawk immediately slowed down. It quickly stabilized and hovered in the air. Elder Wang, young Master Nie Tian, please. Zhu Lian had a faint smile on her face as she gestured for Nie Tian and the others to leave. Thank you, Miss Zhu. Wang Chongfeng cupped his hands and thanked her. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and waited for Nie Tian to leave before he went down. Miss Zhu. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly looked at Zhu Lian and said, "The girl in the room seems to be sick. Can I take a look?" Zhu Lian frowned and her eyes flashed with anger. Then, she said in a cold tone, "Young Master Nie Tian, my sister is not sick. There is no need for you to meddle in her business. Our second miss is not sick. She is just physically weak." The old man in gray, who was standing beside Zhu Lian, said in a cold tone. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that Zhu Lian and the old man in gray were very secretive about the little girl's illness and did not allow others to talk about it. "Sister, don't quarrel with others." At this time, a weak voice came from the room. Then, a little girl walked out. However, she had only taken 2 steps when she was hit by a strong wind from high up in the sky. Her body went limp and she almost fell. Roar! Zhu Lian saw that her sister had suddenly walked out. She moved and supported her. When Nie Tian saw the weak little girl, he suddenly frowned and his eyes became slightly complicated. The little girl was about 13 or 14 years old. Her facial features were delicate and delicate. What was most surprising was that the little girl's skin was crystal clear like white jade. It was almost transparent. This was not the delicate skin of an ordinary girl. It was a sickly white. It was so pale that one could even see the blood vessels and organs in her body through her skin. Nie Tian was not the only one who could see it. Everyone else could see it. This kind of scene was very frightening. It gave people a creepy feeling. When Nie Tian saw this, his eyes trembled and he spat out 4 words, "Meridian-less body." No wonder Nie Tian felt that Zhu Ruer's aura was somewhat familiar. Turned out that she was the legendary meridian-less body. The meridian-less body was a kind of congenital disease. People were born without meridians. Ordinary people were born with 4 limbs, 100 meridians and 9 energy meridians, but they had not awakened them. However, people with the meridian-less body were born with weak meridians and no energy meridians. This kind of people usually died the moment they were born. Even if they survived, they would definitely not live past childhood. Nie Tian did not know how Zhu Ruer, who was born without meridians, could live until now. "How do you know about the meridian-less body?" Zhu Lian was suddenly stunned. Her eyes flashed with killing intent. "Brat, who the hell are you?" The gray-robed old man also became angry and growled. Zhu Ruer's meridian-less body was a secret of the Zhu family. Nie Tian glanced at Zhu Ruer and said it immediately. This was too strange. "I am an alchemist." Nie Tian became cold and said in a deep voice. Meridian-less body, Nie Tian was very familiar with it. Hence, he identified it at first glance. In his previous life, Nie Tian had a friend who was a meridian-less body. This person's status was very high, and her strength was also very strong. She was one of the Heaven Realm's peak powerhouses, the only female among the Heaven Realm 9 emperors, Cold Emperor Mao Xianglong. Nie Tian had always been very curious. Mao Xianglong was born with a meridian-less body. How could she possibly grow to 9th level Heavenly Emperor strength? People with meridian-less bodies found it hard to even survive. Mao Xianglong was actually able to reach peak Heavenly Emperor with a meridian-less body. It truly made people sigh in admiration. Alchemist. When everyone heard Nie Tian's words, they were collectively stunned, their eyes becoming extremely strange. Who could have thought that a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist from the spatial world was actually an alchemist too? For Nye Tian to be able to reach Heavenly Emperor realm strength in the spatial world, this was already super talent breaking through plane restrictions. And he was actually even an alchemist. The terror of his talent was unimaginable. Is what you said true? Zhu Lian's beautiful eyes flickered, revealing a hint of unconcealable heat, as if grabbing a life-saving straw. Nye Tian did not speak either. A palm reached out. The 9 heavenly fire art revolved in his body. Blazing flames actually gushed out of thin air between his 5 fingers, dancing wildly in the air like a long snake.